All right, good morning and welcome everyone. I want to go ahead and welcome you to the 2022 Parent Empowerment Conference. We do have our co-presidents, Mr. Lawrence and Mr. Spencer, and they will be giving us the opening remarks for our conference. Go ahead, take it away, guys.
Good morning, everybody. I hope that everybody is well. First to get go, I'd like to say thank you to our outreach committee chair, Ms. Christy Angel and her team, and all the panelists for coming out here, sharing and empowering our families. My name is Mr. Lawrence. I'm one of the co-presidents for District 75. Unfortunately, I won't be able to be here with you guys today. I look forward to seeing the recording, but I know this is going to be a successful because I have had a chance to review and look at the panelists credential, and I'm sorry that I won't be able to stay and partake into it. But we want to say thank you all for joining in on this Saturday, and we look forward to continuing this partnership with you in the future for the benefit of all kids and all family in District 75 and other districts. So like that being said, I turn it over now to my right hand, Mr. Spencer. Thank you.
Blessings and thank you, Mr. Lawrence. God bless you and Allah bless you all. Proud to be the co-president of the Citywide Council District 75, finishing up my 5th term. Want to echo Mr. Lawrence's gratitude for Treasurer Christy Angel and her outreach committee, all our 10, 11 members that contributed to where we are. And the thoughts that I want to start off with is my colleague Amy Ming Tsai and I started this journey 5 years ago. And by this time next spring, this time, a new citywide council for District 75 will be elected. And I want it on record that I hope parents get this and see this as a foundation as to what this council is for our community. We have challenges in terms of communication. We have challenges in terms of transparency. We have challenges amongst ourselves. And this is how we advocate for ourselves and make it better than the way we found it. We have a collaboration here with tenured council members like VP Celia Green, Mr. Lawrence, Amy Ming Tsai, and myself, who's been in it for a few minutes, so to speak, and then Ms. Angel, Ms. Montalvan, Ms. Husbands, and others on this council that are looking to push this council forward to make sure it's more accountable and more equitable for our kids. So please take this in, soak it in. It's the first of many. We love you guys. We'll represent you guys. You'll see more of us, and the way we can have a stronger council going into the next term this time next year. Thank you so much for your time. God bless you all. Stay safe, stay hydrated today, and I turn it over to the fabulous Ms. Christy Angel.
Thank you, Mr. Spencer. Again, I want to say good morning and thank you to each of you for being here with us today. We are very pleased to be able to welcome those of you that have been here with us for a long time, as well as those of you who may be new to District 75 and the Citywide Council for District 75. We are proud to host the 2022 CCD 75 Virtual Parent Empowerment Conference on this Zoom platform with all of you. Before we get started, I'd like to express my sincere appreciation to all of you who have helped make this event come together and be a success. My co-chair, Amy Ming Tsai, council members Constance Asiadu, and council members Christy Montalvan. We could not have done it without you, so thank you, thank you, thank you. Also, today's sessions will include community services, social behavior and emotional well-being supports, transitional services into adulthood, arts and culture. Additionally, you will be guided through pertinent information regarding parent and student legal rights. Our goal is to prepare our parent and caregivers by empowering them with relevant knowledge. I want to give you a bit of guidance as to how our sessions and Q&As will work. The sessions will run for 30 minutes and there will be a 15-minute Q&A that will be allotted for all questions. The chat feature will be available for questions as well as the raised hand feature. If you need assistance, please type #support in the chat and someone will reach out to you to assist you. There will be 1 minute given per question. The theme of our conference is empowerment, and we're hoping that you feel empowered, truly empowered after this conference. Now I would like to introduce my co-moderator, Amy Tsai, and she will kick off our conference and our first session and introduce our panelists. Amy, take it away.
Thank you so much, Christy, and thank you for bringing this conference to light. I want to just say good morning to everyone and welcome to our Empowering Conference. We are going to start with our session 1, supporting emotional, behavioral, and mental health needs for children with special needs. We have an amazing panel of contributors today, and we will hear each in the following order. Ryan Grimes, certified pediatric nurse practitioner in developmental behavioral pediatrics. Ryan has the honor of working with children and their families from infancy to young adulthood by evaluating, diagnosing, educating, and providing treatment for a wide variety of developmental behavioral difficulties. She received her master's in nursing from Vanderbilt University. Our second panelist, Rebecca Wright, a board certified behavior analysis school psychologist, Right Way Care, and is a doctorate in behavioral health candidate. Rebecca Wright is a certified behavior analyst and a licensed behavior analyst in the state of New York. She received both her undergraduate degrees in psychology and her master's of science in education at Long Island University. Rebecca has worked as a certified school psychologist for early intervention and has also worked as a behavior specialist for the Office of People with Developmental Disabilities in New York. She has 17 years of clinical experience working with individuals with special needs. She has extensive experience working with children and adults within their home, schools, and residential program. Our third panelist, Lala Yusubova, I apologize if I said your last name wrong, Executive Director of Spark Kids, Social and Enrichment Programs for Children. She holds a master's degree in early childhood, special education from Hunter College. She also holds an undergraduate degree from the University of Michigan of Business Management and Human Resources. Welcome, presenters, and I yield to you. Ryan, would you like to start?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I appreciate this opportunity as a provider, but also as a mama in this. So I appreciate it. And also you may hear my little one in the background, so excuse him. But so I am a nurse practitioner. I work in developmental behavioral pediatrics, and oftentimes parents come to us as they are referred from either their community resources or primary care providers. I see anything from developmental delay to an premature baby, genetic condition, learning difficulties, ADHD, anxiety, coexisting conditions, autism, the list goes on. The problem that we're having, as I'm sure Ms. Wright will say, is that there's not enough providers. There are not enough providers. And so my goal as a person working in the field, as a mom who advocates, is to help with how parents can advocate on their own behalf. When I think of my own story, had I not known how the process works, my son's first disability that you could see was physical. You could see it. And when I went to primary care and said, hey, I have a concern about this, they said, let's just watch and see. And I said, you know what? I would rather you let me be crazy and let me be that mom and send me where I need to go so I can do something if there's something to be done, rather than just push it off. Let's wait another year. Because what I know as a provider is the earlier the intervention, the better the outcome. And that outcome was, hey, you need to emergently go to neurology. So I was thankful for that. So in my practice, my goal is to advocate and to build confidence with families, break barriers so that they can get the best care. Best care can be difficult. And so what I've learned through looking at multiple insurances is that insurances require different referrals or do not require a referral. So sometimes with parents, what I'll say is, hey, your primary care might have sent you here, and you may have waited on the wait list for 6 months, 18 months. But what you need to know is that there are community outreach programs there. You can seek out speech education, occupational, you reach out to physical therapists in the community to see if you require a referral for care. And so that's part of how I break down the barriers. The other thing that we do in clinic is try to affiliate ourselves with our community services. So I am in the state of North Carolina. And so in the state of North Carolina, for birth to 3, there is a program here through the CDSA. And through that program, they are able to assess children. And then if they still continue to meet criteria, we'll transition them into the Exceptional Children's Program based on where their county is. And so these are things that I don't know primary care physicians are well aware of. They're not in our areas. So we have partnered with our primary care physicians to help educate them on, yes, the referral is accurate, but those families may sit on the wait list for 6 to 12 months. And so in that meantime, we need them to have early intervention care. That may come from private services, it may come through CDSA, but we need them to have and be linked to some kind of care and evaluation. The evaluations that we do in our clinic are not just sold to us. You can see a child psychologist, neurodevelopmental specialist as well. But again, there is limited resources out there, limited providers out there for what we do. And so in clinic, what I try to do is break barriers to care. And oftentimes my barriers happen to be socioeconomic or barriers of bias towards diagnosis or not wanting children to be labeled. And so I try to break those down as well. And in the way that I practice, because I'm not a medical provider, I'm a nurse, and I follow a nursing model, is that I follow that when I'm in the room with you, I'm talking about neurodiversity. I consider myself a neurodivergent person myself. I was an ex-preemie, got anxiety, ADHD, learning disabilities. And for me, what that means is it's a brain difference. It's a natural difference in my brain development, right? And rather than looking at that difference in my ability as a deficit, I'm looking at it as a difference. And my job as the provider is to assist families with optimizing the development of their child where they are, no matter what their diagnosis is. And so that's the perspective I take. And I think that perspective helps parents understand that when we're making a diagnosis, although we're looking at DSM-5 criteria, we're doing testing, we're looking at numbers. At the end of the day, what I'm trying to do is maybe clear out some of the differential diagnoses to prioritize so that I know how to implement their plan of care in terms of referrals. And again, those referrals can be anything from behavioral therapy, whether it's cognitive behavioral therapy, ABA therapy, speech, occupational therapy, physical therapy, equine therapy, which is horse therapy, aquatic therapy, art therapy. There is so much out there, but limited resources. And then other things that I do as a provider is help parents meet their child where they are. As a neurodivergent parent, it's hard.
You went muted, Ryan.
Okay, is that better?
Yes, we got you back.
As a neurodivergent parent, it's hard for me to parent my neurodivergent child. So if I have a family come in and their 13-year-old has a diagnosis of ADHD, and they're like, they are just so lazy. It is so frustrating to have to ask them to do these 3-step commands on the weekend to get their chores done because they just are so lazy. I have to go back and say, yeah, they're 13. So you're going to see typical 13-year-old behavior. But the other side of that is that they may lack an executive function. And then I explain executive functions are the ability to plan. So when you don't have the ability to plan and you have a parent who's sending you into fight or flight, you may avoid or resist what they're asking you to do, which appears to be oppositional or lazy. And so breaking that down for parents and saying, okay, so a better plan might be going back to what you want them to do and helping them know how to do those steps. It might be a visual aid. It may be you regulating yourself first and understanding that you're triggered by the fact that you asked them to do a request 1, 2, 3, 4 times, and they haven't done it. And so by the time you're fed up, you're yelling, and that doesn't help. So taking the conflict out is first. And so I teach parents a lot about regulating themselves. So if I see it in the room, I'll say, I see that you're very triggered by this behavior. And the first thing I need you to do is regulate yourself. And that's hard. It's hard for me. I don't have all the answers. 48 hours was coming 3 days ago for my son because I was like, I'm done with you. It's hard to do. Everything is on a spectrum. The other thing is that many of the families that I deal with are in families of neurodivergence. Mom has ADHD, child has ADHD, mom has learning difficulties. So to meet your child where they are, it can be even more difficult. So allowing them the space to express their frustrations, but also say, it is okay to know that you are maybe not the right teacher for your child. And how can we get them tutoring services and what can we do? And then lastly, I just wanted to talk about the working relationships that I have with parents as a provider in the community. So for me as a practitioner, the things that I do can be sitting in on IEP meetings, can be explaining the difference between an IEP meeting and 504 plan, helping to advocate families that may need to progress from a 504 plan to an IEP and the reasons why. I go to schools sometimes to observe kids. I spend a lot of time on the phone with parents, helping them to advocate, but I also like to try to introduce them to advocates in the community that can better explain their rights in the school setting. And so that is the majority and the bulk of what I do as a provider in the community.
Thank you so much, Ryan. We're gonna go to Rebecca. Rebecca, are you ready?
Yes, good morning. Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here. Special thanks to the Citywide Council of District 75. I do have a PowerPoint presentation. So Christy, can I kind of share my screen? Do I have
Absolutely.
the ability? Okay, because I want to respect the time. I want to respect the time. All right. So I'm going to do a very brief presentation. Give me one second. Yes, a very brief presentation on supporting the emotional, behavioral, and mental health needs of special needs children. And in this presentation, I'm going to go over the relationship between the special needs population and mental health, special populations and social emotional skills, and lastly, the emotional support needed for parents that have children with disabilities. So in 2000, when it comes to mental health, in 2014 and 2015, they noticed that there was an increase among those with special needs, more specifically autism, that there were higher rates of psychiatric disorders being diagnosed in comparison to the general population, those that do not have special needs. And so we were seeing an increase in anxiety disorders, ADHD, obsessive compulsive disorders, depression, and also mood disorders. I'm just going to move this out of the way so you guys can see the whole slide. And of course, if you have an increase in the diagnosis, you also have an increase in the rates of psychotropic medication for our kids. So you're going to have children with special needs who are taking one or more medications per day. And so you ask yourself, why is this occurring? Why does there seem to be an increase in the psychiatric disorders among our special needs children? Well, of course, we talk about genetics, but then if you look at this list that I have here of the difficulties that our children face on a daily basis due to their special needs, you would understand that the difficulty of them maintaining relationships, creating relationships, friendships, and also if they're having problems with hygiene, they might be rejected. And also if they do not have self-control over their maladaptive behaviors, they may also feel rejected as well. So our kids are more prone to feelings of anxiety, loneliness, isolation, depression, rejection, and other feelings. Unfortunately, almost for the older population, even suicide, unfortunately. And now that we're talking about mental health services for our kids with special needs, what do the parents face when they're trying to advocate for their child to get mental health services in healthcare? Right? What are the challenges? Well, I will say this, not only in the mental health department, but also in the primary care department, health department, that most of our care, well, I'll say some healthcare providers are not trained to provide services to the special needs population. For example, in the general population, when you're trying to diagnose a child or individual, you're doing interviews, questionnaires. But when we come to the special needs population, if they're having issues with the verbal language, impaired cognitive abilities, and maladaptive behaviors that make it difficult for the healthcare providers to actually get a real good understanding of the symptoms and be able to diagnose. I mean, sure, they have observations and sure they have reports from the caregivers, but sometimes it's not accurate. So you might have an increase of a misdiagnosis for our kids. And so, and when you look at the aged out individuals, we're talking about the individuals with special needs who are 21, they're out of school, or 25, or they have ran out of their health insurance coverage. You have a lack of access to facilities that provide mental health services for the special needs population. We also have a lack of access to health insurance coverage, and also the inability to pay for services. So with all of these issues that the parent is facing, to advocate for their child to get mental health services, what is the solution? The solution is this: we need more healthcare research that includes the special needs population. We need new diagnostic tools for the special needs population. We need more awareness and more training for behavioral health professionals and primary care professionals. And lastly, we also need parents to continue to advocate not just for their children in the realm of education, but also in healthcare itself. Here is an example of what most healthcare workers are trying to improve: patience, empathy, anticipate the individualized needs of the patient with accommodations. They need to accommodate your child. And I have a lot of horror stories about that. They need resources that they can refer you to special people who specialize in the population. And they need, most importantly, to listen. Right. So now that we talked about mental health, we're going to go into the meat of it, which is the social emotional skills that are needed for our kids to succeed. The definition is social emotional skills are the child's ability to identify and also to appropriately respond to the emotions of others. Due to the time restraints, if there's any further time later on, I can explain how each of these basic skills can be taught, but I will just go over it briefly. Your child should learn how to label the emotions of themselves and others. They should be able to explain why they feel the way that they feel. Number 3, they should learn how to show empathy towards others, and that's pretty tricky, but it is possible. Number 4, they should learn to express their emotions without engaging in inappropriate behaviors. That means coping skills. Number 5, they should have an appropriate level of interest in other people's actions and belongings, or, show some type of level of enthusiasm over someone else's positive behaviors. And lastly, number 6, they should be able to anticipate how a peer might react to their behaviors, or learn to avoid certain behaviors that might elicit negative reactions from others. So that's what where it comes from, the perspective taking skill. All right, and we always talk about the child, but we never talk about the parents. And I heard it mentioned earlier by Ms. Grimes about, the parents need help too as well. So what do you think the parents are going through? Well, we've noticed through research that parents who have special needs children are prone to chronic depression and anxiety. So they have the social and economic concerns. They have the financial burden, the changes in their families due to the special needs of their child, and also the insecurity of long-term caregiving. That indicates that when the child becomes older, they're now grown children, what's the next step? They need some assistance in navigating the system, the healthcare system. And so healthcare providers need to understand and really be sensitive to the emotional concerns that parents have, especially as they're going through the stages of adjustment or lifetime of care. So the stages of adjustment starts with the diagnosis, of course, and of course you go through the process of grieving at the same time. There is the diagnosis, and then so you feel angry, you feel first denial, then anger, then you're trying to fix the problem, and so forth. And we need our healthcare providers to be assisting our parents through every stage of adjustment. So here are some of the suggestions that they have from research. Social supports are very important. Support groups for couple relationships and single parents, which include learning coping strategies as well as stress management. We need to promote family cohesion. That means that all the families should be working together for this child that has special needs. I'm asking the parents to be willing to be flexible and open to trying new strategies that are suggested by your service providers. If it doesn't work, at least try it. And also the importance of parent decision-making should be encouraged. The parent should be deeply involved in the treatment and deeply involved in making decisions. And also the healthcare provider should be sensitive to the culture and the background of that family. And lastly, we have behavior interventions. If we have enough time, if you want to take a picture of this very quickly or screenshot, here are some places where you can actually have for your child to learn social, emotional skills. For those that have no problem sitting down to read books, I have some books here. For those that are more into interactive things, that the first one is actually an app that teaches social skills. These are the references that I've used. And I just want to thank you for this opportunity. I'm super excited and I hope that this was helpful.
So much for sharing all of that, Rebecca, and appreciate it. And again, to all of our families here, we will be sharing the resources in the chat of the links and as well their contact information. Please view it. Please take a snapshot, write it down, keep it to yourself for future needs. Appreciate that. So we're gonna go to our third panelist. Lala, are you here?
Yes, I'm here. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I also want to thank everyone for the opportunity. We are so happy that we can present for the District 75 families and tell a little bit about our program and how it benefited the families that have been with us for many years. So I also have a PowerPoint presentation, so let me start it, 1 second. Christy, can you see the whole screen?
It's perfect.
Okay, thank you. So Spark Kids has been founded in 2013 by Dr. Bobby Donan. She has founded the program because she has 2 kids that are on the spectrum. And as they were aging, she couldn't find a program that would provide different types of art, science, sports activities under the same umbrella. So she decided to start a program and hire people that have a lot of experience in teaching drama, arts, martial arts, and so on. And it became very successful, even though we're not known in the community, but the families that have found out about us, they've been with us for many years. And some families, for example, they come in and out of the program, but a lot of the families that started with us, they've been with us for many years. So let me just start. So we are a social enrichment and recreational program for students of all ages and abilities. So we have a wide range of ages. We have kids starting from ages 6 to 25. And it's a very diverse group. Kids have different types of special needs. And this program allows for them to come together and to build friendships, to socialize, to and also to enjoy all of the activities that we provide to them. A lot of them love. It's a weekend program, so they look forward to every Saturday. So we recently started collaborating with JCC. Prior to being at JCC, we were at the Trevor Day School for several years. And then we were lucky enough to find space at JCC, which is on 76 in Amsterdam. And the spaces allows us to increase the number of kids families that we can service and to have more activities. It has a gymnasium, it has a swimming pool. So we have anywhere from about 7 to 8 activities per day. Our day starts at 10:30 and it ends at 3:30. And within that time, we have yoga, art, dance, we have a lunch break, we have drama, music, martial arts, and recess because we have an outdoor space on the rooftop. When it's nice outside, we take them out so that they can run around and have some, free time with each other. It's a really amazing program because it allows for the parents to also leave their kids for half a day and go and do a lot of things that they want to do in a city or run their errands. And a lot of the families appreciate that because they know that their kids are doing something on a Saturday afternoon that's it's educational, it's cultural, it's allows them to build to socialize and build friendships, and they're getting something great out of their time, because all of the kids, they go to school during the week, but they don't and they have that educational support, but not so much when it comes to enrichment. And we try our best to provide that to our families. This is our yoga class. So our students start the day off with the centering and relaxing and challenging yoga classes. So our yoga instructor, she has taught yoga for many years. She is certified in teaching yoga. So everyone that is teaching our classes, they have masters and they have certification in what they teach. So all of the teachers are they're professionals. And also, besides teachers, we have for every 2 to 3 kids in the program, we have we call them group leaders, but they're teacher assistants. So what they do is they support the kids and the teachers throughout the activities. For example, if one of the students needs help with alignment, then a group leader helps the child, the student with that, to make sure that, or for example, if a student needs to leave the room to use the bathroom, so they're being supported, and it's a very safe environment. We make sure that they enjoy all of these activities, but they're also safe in doing that as well. This is our art project. We concentrate heavily on arts because as you all know, art promotes freedom of creative expression, which helps students to relax and think differently. Anyone can make art, and there's so many different forms of art, which helps students with special needs to gain independence, to gain confidence and self-esteem. So our art courses, they provide that. And what we also do is because all of our students, they have different types of special needs, we make sure that we modify every activity for each child. So we do a lot of that throughout our activities. So our visual arts teacher she comes up with challenging and beautiful projects each week for the students. So it's never a boring activity. We do a lot of 3D art. We do a lot of science activities as well. So it's really educational and also a lot of fun, because they come together to do the activities, but also through the activities, they build friendships and they socialize. And this was the major shortage that Dr. Bobby experienced when she was looking for programs for her sons, because she couldn't find a program that would provide both the activities and the social aspect of it as well. We also have a great drama teacher. He graduated from Columbia University, and what we do is at the end of every semester, at the end of every semester, we put together a show. So let's say towards like the last months of the semester, the teachers and the students, they work on a show, and they work on putting together a show from the start till the end, and then they present it to all the families and friends. And they, the kids love it because they're in the process of, starting from just, doing rehearsals to completing and putting together a really wonderful presentation. And that gives them a lot of satisfaction and confidence and self-esteem, and they love doing that. So it's another aspect of our program that we're very proud of. We have an amazing music class. We love to hear our students' voices, and we sing our favorite songs in music class. And we also, when we do shows, parts of it has to do with music. So some of the classes we use for rehearsals as well. And then we have dance class. Our students love to dance, they love to move around. So this is also another way for them to express their creativity and also be social and make friendships. Another aspect of our program is to do trips and also bring special guests. About 3 to 4 weeks ago, we had a Spider-Man come in, and our kids they love superheroes, so they love having us put together this special guests coming in. Or, for example, we also go to museums, we do field trips. Last semester, prior to COVID, actually, we took them to 92nd Y for a swimming session. And actually, we're hoping that now that we are at JCC, which has a beautiful swimming pool, that we'll be able to actually do it more often. We had a magician come in about 2 weeks ago and entertain the students. So as I've mentioned, we have a lot of guests that come in. And here's one of our students getting in the act with the magic presenter. We also spend time with friends. Our students make and maintain friendships. So many of our students started with us when they were 6, and now they're aged into, like, they are in their teenage years, and they've made friends, and they actually meet with some of the kids outside of Spark Kids. They go to each other's birthday parties. So this is something that is a huge part of our program, is for them to actually build friendships. And as I mentioned, we also have space at the rooftop, and at the end of the day, if the weather permits, our students enjoy some fresh air on the beautiful enclosed rooftop. So that's another benefit. So we have our general fees for the full day is $125, for half day is $65, and a single class is $25. But what we also do is we accept self-direction. A lot of the families, when they entered into our program, a lot of them did not have self-direction. So I myself went through the front door, and I've learned how to help the families to get self-direction. So I've helped about 15 families go through the front door and gain self-direction. And so they come to the program for free because they have self-direction, and they can get reimbursed for the activities that we provide, which I think would benefit the District 75 students, because many of them, I believe, have self-direction. So if you would like to get enrolled into our program, here is our website. And the enrollment process is very easy. And if the child does not like the program, then obviously there's no commitment. But we do suggest for the families to try it out. Now that we're at JCC, it allows us to have more families and to even create. We currently have 3 groups, and every group has kids in different ages. So, but we can definitely multiply the groups because the space now allows us to have more families. So this is it. I really appreciate for the opportunity to present. As I've mentioned, our program really concentrates on having the kids, the students come together and to build friendships and to socialize. And that's like the biggest aspect of our program. And we're really happy that we've held many of the families that have been with us for many years. And we're hoping to provide more access to more families. And hopefully this will, it will bring awareness to the fact that we have the program. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lala. I appreciate your presentation. I think that we are going to go into the Q&A section of this first session panelists of presenters. We are going to share just again the instructions as to Q&A, making sure that everyone has an opportunity to ask a question. And also, you never know who has a really great question that we never thought of. So
Hey, Amy,
sure.
I'm just gonna put, sorry about that, I don't mean to cut you off. I'm gonna put the link in the chat for a survey and any other questions. It's also a way to just let us know that you're here. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. And I'll do that at the end of each session after each presentation before the Q&A. Thanks, Amy.
No problem. Thank you so much, Craig. We are going to make sure that if you have the option to raise your hand, or if you can't, please put a hashtag support in our chat. We can help you as well. Christy M is also checking the chat. So if you choose to want to just put your question in the chat, please do so. You're welcome to. And we're going to begin. So if anybody has any questions, and we ask that if you can keep your questions short to a minute. We want to give as many questions that people want to raise can ask their questions.
Amy, there's a question in the chat.
Sure.
Would you like me?
Yes, please.
From Tiffany, and I believe this was regarding Lala's presentation. What are the requirements for these services?
So we don't require much. We just need, if you want to attend the program, you just have to go through our enrollment process, which is very simple. You just go on our website, and then we have a program from September until mid-June. So we don't have anything during the summer months because a lot of our kids, they go to camps or they go away for summer. So we don't provide any summer activities at this time, but we're hoping that as we grow, we might actually have summer program as well. But you don't really need to, we don't really have that many requirements. What you do is you sign up for the program and you try it out. If you like it, then you can continue attending. And as long as it's a good, if your child enjoys the program and you feel like this could benefit your child, then you continue attending. And if you have a self-direction, then that's you get reimbursed for attending the program. If not, then we also, as I've mentioned, I've helped a lot of families go through the front door and get self-direction so that they can get reimbursed, not just for our program, but for many other programs that are out there that is in existence for kids with special needs. So.
Thank you. We're gonna go to Audrey, but before we do that, if you're not speaking, please keep yourself muted so that we don't hear any background noise and don't want to embarrass anybody. So please, Audrey, your hand is up.
Hi, good morning. I have two children with autism, both adults. One's 26, one's 18. I don't know much about self-direction. We do have the Medicaid waiver. So is self-direction complicated, and is it really worth it?
It is a little complicated because it takes time, but the main thing is to go through, to register for the front door and go through the process. And once you do that, then it takes about anywhere from 3 to 6 months to get a self-direction, and it is really beneficial if you are going to use it towards different programs. Yes, because you can get reimbursed for them or not even pay out of pocket at all. And like, for example, we have families that pay us in advance and then they get reimbursed. And we also have families that I just bill the agencies directly, so they don't even deal with that part of it. So it is beneficial if you are going to use up the money that they provide to you towards activities. If you're not really going to use it, then not really doesn't make sense to go through the process of getting self-direction, because it's time consuming, and it takes it takes a little bit of work.
And that's something you help with, you said?
I do help, like if it's a family that attends our program, then yes, I do help, but that's not my main concentration. I just help the families because I believe that it's a great thing to have, obviously.
Okay.
Just to
Great, thank
answer Audrey's question as to more information on OPWD services or self-direction, we actually have a presenter this morning who will be touching a little bit about it. So
Great.
stay on and listen to the rest of our conference. Appreciate it. Do we have any more hands raised or questions in the chat, Christy? I see one from Galaxy.
It's Galaxy Note, and then we do have another one in the chat as well.
Hi, good morning. Actually, my name is Sonia, and I have a question. My son has front door service. Does he need to pay any fee for those programs?
No, if you have self-direction and if the program does accept self-direction, then you don't have to pay any fee. But it depends on the program. Each program does different, reimburses things differently. So you have to, it depends on the program that you choose.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
We can go to the question in the chat.
I do believe that was the same one. It was Miss Sonia that was actually speaking. I do have a question that I would like to submit for Ryan. For parents that may not know what a developmental pediatric doctor is, how would you say, what is the process of becoming one, or excuse me, of getting referred to one if we don't know where do we start at in that regard?
Yeah, so normally our referrals are coming from primary care, but Google is good. And so what I normally will tell families, especially having been in rural areas where there's limited access, is to look for it on Google. Developmental specialist is usually what parents will say they've Googled. But normally I would just tell them to look for a developmental behavioral specialist or a psychologist. Also, the community resources that are available to you sometimes will know who's, like in Maryland, it was like Dr. Badaway, that's the person they always refer to in the community. So asking community resources as well. There is a website, the Society of Developmental Behavioral Pediatrics, that also lists in abundance the national providers around the area that you can also look for providers on.
Thank you.
We
recognize.
we're gonna go to Beatrice because I think Sonia had a question already that we answered. I want to give opportunity to Beatrice.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. It's still good morning. Sorry about that. My question.
Good morning, Beatrice.
Good morning. My question was to actually everyone there. I was asking in connection with the services. I was asking where do they have it? Do they have it in the Bronx, or where are they located? If you want to join the program, where are they? Like, And do they have in the Bronx, Manhattan, Queens? And if so, what is the
So if
do
you're
different
asking
places
about
provide?
self-direction
No,
services,
not self-direction. I'm asking about you. I'm actually speaking. I'm asking about your program. Where are they
we
located?
we only have one location right now, which is on the
Okay.
Upper West Side of Manhattan. We're at the
Only one location? Are you
GCC.
opening more?
Well, hopefully, if we get big, we will open more, and that's the reason why I really appreciate for this opportunity, because even though, you know, not too many families know about us, because we've been around for many years, but we were kind of small, and now that we are at the location where we are now, we're able to have more families come in, and hopefully, if we do well with that, then we can actually open more locations in different boroughs. Yes.
I just wanted to follow-up question to that. If this is, I'm guessing, a program that a family would have to travel just to get to your program, can you in any way help support families that are unable to go to your current location? Like any reimbursement as to like traveling on in a taxi or bus?
Or do they have transportation to the
We do
program?
not provide transportation at this time, but a lot of the families, because if they have self-direction, I think they do have some, they do get reimbursed for taking transportation, but that's not something that we provide at this time. But we are hoping to be able to provide more services as we get more families involved. As I mentioned, for many years.
Yes.
Yeah, for many years, we had about 30 to 40 families, but as we get bigger, hopefully we can provide more services, and that's what we want to really accomplish with our program.
Yes, I think that sorry. I think that if there's transportation for families.
Hey, Spencer, I want to slap that bald head.
Can we please put that person in the waiting room, Christy, please? I think that the opportunity for families to really participate is really
That was like very rude for you to interrupt her.
Christy, can we put that person in the Okay, so I just wanted to apologize for the interruption. We do have some other panelists in other sessions, so we just want to be mindful of time because we are inviting them into this space. So if you have a question, please wait till a little bit later. We will have a little bit of a time for Q&As, or you can put in a chat, or you can also share with us through email at d75council@schoolsnyc.gov, and we will put our email address in the chat. I'm going to turn it over to my co-moderator, Christy Angel, to go to our second session.
Thank you, Amy. I know there are a few questions. I do want to say that the session that we're going into next will be a great segue, and this is Project Connect, and that is with ADAPT Community Services, and our presenter is Wendy De Leon. She's the Director of Housing and Assistance Services, and she will discuss social and community supports.
God damn, Craig Spencer.
And case management, and much more. Now I'm going to turn the floor over to Wendy. I'm going to make some adjustments in the waiting room. And Wendy, welcome, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. And as Christy mentioned, my name is Wendy De Leon. I'm the Director of Housing Assistance Services at ADAPT Community Network. I'm a fill-in for the original presenter. So the original presenter is the Project Connect coordinator, and I'll go into a little bit more about what Project Connect is. But as Christy mentioned, I will be speaking also about additional services at ADAPT and OPWDD, since there were some mention of front door OPWDD services and the like. So I have a presentation I'd like to share. If you could just bear with me, please. So Project Connect, social and community supports. I'd like to just start by giving you a little information about the agency. ADAPT Community Network is a human service not-for-profit providing cutting-edge programs and services for people with disabilities. Our mission is to empower people through innovative solutions, one person at a time, and we are accredited through several third-party organizations that focus on quality standards for social service and health service organizations. Some of those third parties are CARF, CQL, and NCQA. So supports and services at ADAPT, we have 100 comprehensive programs that include education, health, technology, residential and recreational services for over 18,000 individuals and families annually who are living with disabilities such as autism, cerebral palsy, Down syndrome, neuromuscular disorders, among many others.
Gosh, I just want to lick cream off of Craig's head so bad.
And this is just a list of some of the services that are provided, and I'll go into them a little bit more later on in the presentation. But I do want to start by talking about the New York State Office for People with Developmental Disabilities, or as I'll refer to it from now on as OPWDD. And that's a very important acronym to remember because beyond the Department of Education, OPWDD focuses on services for people with developmental and or intellectual disabilities. So if DOE doesn't provide the service for you, then you may be able to find that service under OPWDD funded programs. So what is OPWDD? OPWDD is a state agency that provides services to people of all ages with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Also to many children who have an IEP, classifications of intellectual disability, multiple disabilities, or autism, just to name a few can qualify for these services. The application and the application and review process for OPWDD services is called eligibility determination process, and I'll get into that a little more in just a moment. Only OPWDD decides whether a person meets all the conditions of eligibility for services funded under that particular office. So who's eligible for these services? Any individual who wants to receive these services must meet 4 requirements and have a diagnosis of one or more of the following, either an intellectual disability, or developmental disability, autism, CP, epilepsy, neurological impairments, just to name a few. The individual must have had this disability before the age of 22. The disability is expected to be permanent, and the disability affects their ability to live everyday life independently. The OPWDD eligibility review process, as Lala mentioned, can be long. How long it takes you to get eligibility really depends on how quickly you can get the documentation that they require in order to determine whether someone is eligible or not. The eligibility process begins at one of OPWDD's 5 developmental disability regional offices that are located throughout the New York State. You and your family will need to submit materials and records such as reports of assessments conducted by medical professionals. Care manager may help you through this process, and the information you submit will be reviewed to see if your disability meets the requirements specified in New York State law. If it meets the requirements, you are deemed eligible for OPWDD services. Depending on the complexity of your condition, the process for obtaining eligibility determination may require reports from multiple specialty assessments. A face-to-face interview may also be part of the process. So someone had mentioned in the chat that they had attended a front door session. So a front door is exactly, what the name implies. It is the first step towards the eligibility process. You can sign up to attend a front door information center, information session This step is mandatory. The sessions are about 2 hours long, although honestly, it just depends on how many people attend and how many questions may be asked. I've seen them done in about an hour. Usually they're held at a DDRO office in one of the 5 boroughs, or they are given online. Because of the pandemic, most of them are offered virtually at this time. You could attend the session in any borough, it doesn't matter what borough you live in. And sometimes they can be held at schools or community centers. So if you are a professional that works at any one of these types of settings, and you'd like to invite someone from OPWDD to set up a front door session for some parents or people in the community, you can definitely do that as well. There's a calendar of available dates and locations, and there's a link here for you. You can also just kind of Google OPWDD front door, and it'll lead you right into that calendar. So regarding the eligibility process, I did want to just quickly review the forms. Some of the forms or reports that are needed is like a psychological evaluation report, which has to be less than 3 years old. It should include a full-scale IQ score and adaptive behavior skills, a social history or psychological evaluation report that is less than a year old. These might be included in the psychological report listed above or done with your child's school evaluations as part of their IEP process. A medical report is also needed, such as the one from the annual physical conducted for your child's school, and that also has to be less than a year old. An OPWDD may ask you for additional documentation or evaluations, including an IEP. It just depends on how detailed some of the information that you provide to them is. They may require some follow-up information. And that, by the way, is why the process can take as long as it does. So I had mentioned, a care manager in a previous slide. So the care manager is actually a person that works for a CCO or a care coordination organization. Care manager, I have to fix the care coordinator there because it's care manager, is someone who can assist you actually through the process of eligibility, but also once the eligibility is in place, they can assist you in looking up services for you and your loved one. In New York City, there are 3 care coordination organizations that you can choose from. There's Advanced Care Alliance, Care Design New York, and Tri-County Care. So in addition to OPWDD services and eligibility, I also wanted to give you some information about our family support services. So once you have a OPWDD eligibility, it opens up the ability to receive many different services through a wide variety of agencies available to you. The IDD community, IDD, by the way, stands for Intellectual and Developmental Disability. The IDD community is actually very large. There's many agencies that provide services. You heard from Spark Kids, for example, but there's a lot of recreational services and such. So once the eligibility is in place, you can get services through agencies that receive specifically OPWDD funds. So some of the services you can get are family support. Under our family support services at ADAPT, we offer Project Connect, which is our information and referral resource for assistance and support in accessing services, not only within our agency, but outside of it as well. Because if we don't provide the program, then we definitely want to lead you towards a service or organization that will provide what you're looking for or what you and your loved one need. ADAPT provides services to people living in all 5 boroughs. Project Connect is available 5 days a week to answer your inquiries. And here you can see the toll-free number and email in case you have any questions. And that is really our version of a front door, right? In order to start the process for our services, you would normally begin through Project Connect. So under family support, we also have family reimbursement. And family reimbursement provides funds to families of individuals who are approved for services through OPWDD and live at home with family. These funds cover the cost of goods and services that are not obtainable through other sources. So if Medicaid or your other health insurance will not cover it, or maybe covered it, but you haven't, you need a replacement and they have a certain time frame that they'll only cover that particular item every 3 years or every 5 years, family reimbursement may be a great way to get some assistance for some of those out-of-pocket costs. Some of the items that are being covered at this time are clothing, respite care when it comes to emergency needs only, eligible furniture, things like camp programs, recreational activities and classes. And families are eligible to apply once per fiscal year, and the fiscal year runs from July 1st through June 30th. So June 30th of 2022, our fiscal year 22 will end, and our fiscal year 23 will start on July 1st of 2022. Receipts must be dated within the current fiscal year in order to be eligible for reimbursement. Family reimbursement also covers things like durable medical equipment. So wheelchair parts, hospital beds, walkers, and so on. Medical documentation supporting the need for this equipment has to be included. And this could be a letter from the physical therapist, the occupational therapist, the doctor, and so on. The letter must include a signature and a license number. And you must also show proof that Medicaid or whatever other medical insurance you have did not cover the item. So you do have to request the item through them first and get a letter indicating that they weren't going to cover it for you. In addition to family reimbursement, there's a housing assistance services program, which I run. And through that program, we offer advocacy, information, and referral services for a wide range of housing needs. In order to be eligible, families must live in any of the 5 boroughs and have a member of the household or a head of household who is OPWDD eligible. Some of the most common requests we get for our program is people looking for assistance in finding low-income, affordable, or accessible housing. Things like referrals for rent arrears programs. Rent arrears is when you fall behind on the payment of your rent or even utilities. Pest control assistance, information on the eviction process, which unfortunately, because so many people fell behind on their rent, we're hearing a lot about now through the pandemic. We also can provide information about housing court and referral to legal services. And we also provide a lot of information about tenant rights. Please note that under this program, we don't rent apartments, nor do we provide financial assistance. Another program through Family Support is our Doorways to Independence program, which covers home modifications. So the program provides services to people with disabilities, the elderly, and the medically frail. Funding is available to cover the cost of modifications that will improve physical access and safety within the home. You could be a homeowner, a co-op owner, or even a renter to qualify for assistance. So the home modification services to persons with disabilities, elderly, and the medically frail are covered through 2 funding sources. Funding can cover things like a ramp, a stair lift, or even bathroom modifications. I do want to say this is one of just a handful of programs offered through ADAPT where there is some funding available for people who are not OPWDD eligible, right? So through this program, we actually have 2 funding sources. One of them is OPWDD, and of course for that you do need their eligibility. And the other one is the Department for Home and Community Renewal. So for that one, you don't require OPWDD eligibility. You simply have to live in New York City and have some kind of disability that prevents you from accessing your home safely. And there are more eligibility requirements for each of these, but those are the two general ones. Community habilitation is also offered under family support. And this particular program provides services to people of all ages who are looking to improve their independence in the community and at home. You also do require eligibility through OPWDD for this program. They offer individualized approach with one-to-one staffing to help people achieve their self-determined goals. Some of these goals can be things like socialization, learn how to make friends. There's been people who want to learn how to conduct themselves on a date, for example, how to ask someone on a date. There's been people who just want to improve their skills with technology, using a laptop or a tablet. We actually have someone under this program who started his own business. He has like an accessibility pen, a pen that he designed, or a pointer that he designed to allow people with a limited mobility of their hands and their arms to be able to point at things and click on a lot of the touch screens and phones and things of that nature that are available nowadays. So that's just a few examples of what can be covered under that program. OPWDD also has funding for its own housing subsidy program, much like Section 8 and CityFEPS and all these other sort of rental assistance programs. OPWDD has its own funding line for a housing subsidy. So it's meant to support people who want to live independently in the community by subsidizing a portion of the rent. The OPWDD housing subsidy program at ADAPT gives recipients assistance to afford housing in the broader community. Individuals can choose to live alone, they can have roommates or even a live-in caregiver. They are expected to contribute approximately 30% of their countable income. So this is very much like any other housing rental assistance program that's out there. And the housing subsidy pays a difference up to the maximum allowable. So there is a maximum rent that they could cover. And there are some other eligibility requirements for this, but this summarizes pretty much what the program can offer. So additional supports and services that ADAPT include our preschool programs, school age program, recreational services, respite. Family Connect, I want to mention specifically because this is workshops and educational resources for New York City parents and professionals. All the other programs, except preschool and school age, but recreation, respite, they do require OPWDD eligibility. Our school programs and Family Connect are open to people without having to get OPWDD eligibility, but of course, the school is specifically for people with individual and or developmental disabilities. We also offer day habilitation programs, which is for adults 21 and up, supported employment, residential services as well. Again, these are three things that you do need OPWDD eligibility for, but the TechWorks and Trade program and our clinic services are open to everyone. TechWorks is a free public service to access assistive technology and adaptive equipment. Things like wheelchairs, walkers, and other adaptive devices are available. You can actually, it's sort of a loan program. So if you are waiting on some repairs to your wheelchair or just want to try a particular adaptive device because you're not sure that would work for your child or your loved one, you can reach out to TechWorks and Trade and ask to borrow them just to try them out or to use them while you wait for your durable medical equipment to be ready. In our clinic, we have Article 28 and Article 16 clinics in the Bronx and Brooklyn. I do want to point out these services because not every there's specialized doctors for people who have intellectual and developmental disabilities, but not every medical service and every professional knows about the special needs that is required for someone with intellectual disability or developmental disability, certain sensory needs, for example, that maybe they require a specific appointment time where the room's not going to be full of waiting patients that are very noisy. There may be some light adjustments that are needed because of sensory requirements. One of the common issues that comes up with dentists actually is that a lot of people with IDD, they either are not fully aware of what's going on or just do not like strangers, right? So they don't want strangers to touch them. Me personally, I look at dental equipment and I'm like, what is that? So I can only imagine. So a lot of people do require to be put to sleep, even for something as basic as teeth cleaning. And so people who are professionals that are trained, that understand the needs of this particular population, are very much in demand. And so our clinic services definitely are staffed with people who fully understand some of the very special needs that are required or that people with IDD may have. So that concludes my presentation. Again, here's a number for Project Connect and our email. Please also visit our website for any information on upcoming events or some of the workshops for parents. You can also follow us through social media. We also post a lot of the information on upcoming events, such as those workshops and other programs and such. So it's a great way for you to keep up to date with what's going on with the ADAPT Community Network. So any questions or? I'm not sure if we have time for questions right now or.
No, we absolutely do have questions, time for questions in your session. I'm going to hand it over to Christy Montalvan and to Co-President Craig Spencer. There are a couple of questions in the chat if you guys can read those. And then afterwards, we'll go ahead and let anyone who has a hand raised, go ahead and step forward and speak your question as well.
Hey, Christy M, can you just monitor the chat? I'm going to monitor the hands raised.
Yes, I got it. So the first question we have is, does this cover swimming lessons?
If we're talking about family reimbursement, yes, they can, again, with a medical note from a physical therapist or occupational therapist that has their signature in a medical license number. Yes, that is a class that can be reimbursed. We've also had people apply for reimbursement of computer classes, horseback riding, which it can be a type of therapy, just to give you some examples.
Wanda has her hand up. Go ahead and unmute, Wanda.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, good morning. My name is Wanda Ibez Balides. It's a pleasure to meet you all. The reason for this question pertains, it could be personal, but it would not be personal as for all this. You mentioned something about housing. So we've been trying to move out, me, my daughter, and my mom, right? So because my daughter has been receiving services from OPWDD for many, many years, I brought it to attention to her care manager, and she gave me a packet for an application for something from you guys. And because my daughter is 15, I don't know if she qualifies for this. I do have to send it over the mail, and I don't know if I should do it. I know we're trying to get affordable housing and whatnot, but because I know that you guys tend to do this for people over the age of 18. So is this something that qualifies? My mom is 74, but my daughter is 15.
Yeah, so for the Housing Assistance Services Program specifically, all you need to do is have OPWDD eligibility in place. There is no age requirement if you have your OPWDD eligibility in place. That's all you need. Live with your family out in the community in one of the 5 boroughs. So you can definitely go ahead and apply for that program, because whether your daughter's 15 or 4 years old, or 47, age does not matter when it comes to that.
I was a little bit concerned about that because of that. I was trying to hitting it in the dark. I was like, let me fill it out. And thank God, Mr. Craig and Miss Amy and Miss Angel for doing all this. And because I never imagined that you guys were going to be here. So I appreciate you actually doing this. It's magnificent. And Miss Wendy, thank you. You eased my fears so greatly because this is something that is really important for me, my mom, and my daughter. So I will definitely be doing that. Thank you.
Please do. It's my pleasure, Wanda. And part of the reason and why this event is so great is because there is a whole world available to families and their loved ones with a developmental disability. You don't have to limit yourself. If you can think it, it's likely out there. You just have to look for it. And one of the great ways to do that is to rely on your child's school and representatives of that school to kind of guide you towards the services that you need.
Well, Alex, my daughter is 15, so I've been doing this since she was 2. So I appreciate this. I'm definitely gonna be doing this. I really appreciate this. Thank you.
You're very welcome, Wanda. I'll keep an eye out for your application.
I am not gonna say her name, but her last name. Let me. Now that I think of it,
there's no need for you to give me the last name.
No. I'm not gonna give you. As long as I see your
name on the application, I'll know who it is.
That's what I was going to ask. If I put it under my daughter's name, it will show up as my name because definitely she's underage. So
yeah, the applicant is your daughter because she's the one with OPWDD eligibility.
Okay.
But you'll see on our application that right under that we ask for the head of household, which I assume is you, and that's where we would see your name.
So okay, so yes, I did it like that. So I just needed to make sure that I didn't do it wrong. Okay. Thank you,
Not at all.
Wendy.
And of course, if you have more questions, please reach out to our Project Connect and we'll be able to address your questions as well.
Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome.
Definitely, so I'm not gonna take much more of your time. Have a great day and thank you again.
You're welcome. You
thank
too.
you, Mr. Spencer.
Thank you, Wanda. Great to see you.
Same
Beatrice,
here.
We have 2 more questions from the chat from Audrey. The first one was, will this cover braces? And then the second one I think was pertaining to the home assistance. Will it help with purchasing a home?
And Beatrice, you'll be next after that.
Great question about the braces. I have to say I have not heard of braces being covered under family reimbursement, but then again, the other side of that is I have not heard of someone asking for braces to be covered or assistance for braces under family reimbursement. As long as there's some justification for the request, and that's honestly really what it comes down to, right? There has to be a good reason as to why this program is needed for your loved one. If you can justify that, the out-of-pocket cost for the braces is needed, and there is someone, there's a medical aspect of it that says that the braces are needed, then we can definitely push that application along to the DDRO and see what they say. But honestly, with a lot of the requests, because we get applications from hundreds of families throughout the 5 boroughs. Everyone has their own needs. Everyone may be doing different things with their loved one. So what we say to people is try. There's no, it doesn't hurt to try. The worst case scenario is you may be told no, unfortunately we don't cover that, in which case you're back to the same situation you're at now. The family reimbursement application honestly is so straightforward. It's crazy how easy that is to fill out. So please try and we will advocate for the need for that assistance as much as we can with the DDRO.
Thank you.
And So buying your own home, yes, we can assist you, or I should say provide information to you about the process of purchasing a home. But I do want to say, for people who are looking to move, who are looking to purchase a home, start doing the foundation work now. Things that are looked at when you're looking to move or even buy a home: your credit, your financial situation. These are things that you can work on now, before or while you're aiming to get OPWDD eligibility for your child, or even before you apply for our program. Because these are foundational things, right? These are things that we know are needed and you can work on without necessarily the support of anyone else. Um, so I say start building those foundations, and definitely reach out to us. We can, and we have assisted people in providing information through home ownership and so on.
Perfect. We do have a hand raised from Beatrice. You may ask your question.
Hi, thank you so much for this program. I actually did one of the paperwork like 5 years ago for it wasn't to adopt, it was to a different program when my, at that time, Medicaid service coordinator let me fill that. I never heard anything back from the home ownership program. So my question is that I have multiple kids with disability. So I am already in the process and I am already being gotten pre-approval. My question to you is this: what do you guys help with when it comes to home ownership? Is it for down payments? Is it for what do adopt help with when it comes to getting a house for kids with, especially multiple kids with disability?
Okay, well, the Housing Assistance Services Program does not offer financial assistance of any kind. So if we're talking about that particular program, what we can do is provide you information about programs that do assist home buyers, especially first-time home buyers. Talk to you about loan programs. There's classes actually that a lot of lenders require you to attend to learn more about the process of home ownership. This is just some of the examples of things that we can assist you with, but we do not provide financial assistance for the purpose of you purchasing a home.
We have one more question in the chat. It says, for housing, are there places in regular areas or special areas for disabilities?
Well, there's housing available anywhere. New York City Housing Authority, for example, has apartments that are modified specifically for people who have some kind of mobility impairment. HPD, the Housing Preservation and Development, by now I hope everyone's heard of apartment lotteries through their particular department. They also offer about 7% of all new apartments that are catered towards people, or I should say, built for people who have some type of disability, either mobility impairment, visual impairment, or hearing impairment. There's also, your typical apartment. The home modification program can assist you in modifying the apartment so that it caters more to a specific need, like widening doorways, because your adult wheelchair is wide and cannot get through some of those sort of pre-war style doorways that are found in some of the buildings in New York City. There isn't necessarily a special neighborhood, if that's what you're asking, that is specific to people with disabilities. However, there are programs that have received funding to make a group of apartments within a specific building, specifically for people with developmental disabilities. One of those buildings is called Fountain Seaview, located in Brooklyn. It's associated with OPWDD and the Block Institute, which is another organization that has an OPWDD housing subsidy program, and they received funding specifically for the purpose of setting up these group of apartments for people with developmental disabilities.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions in the chat? does an intellectual impairment qualify as a disability for housing?
Well, an intellectual impairment or intellectual disability is a type of disability. When it comes to housing in general, and I hope I'm understanding your question correctly, when it comes to housing in general, there's very little housing that's available specifically for people with intellectual or developmental disability. Mostly what housing thinks about is whether you have a mobility impairment or a visual or hearing impairment, because there's modifications that can be made to a home to make it more accessible for people that fall under that category. So a lot of people with developmental, I shouldn't say a lot, some people with developmental disabilities have mobility impairment, they may have visual or hearing, and so we can advocate for modifications or for apartments specifically based on that. But let's say you have autism and you're applying for an apartment because, and you want to be considered specially because you have autism, unless it's one of those very special, very limited programs that have been receiving funding through OPWDD, a developer and some agency that came together to set aside these bundles of apartments, that most of the housing services are not catered to that particular population. And again, those group of apartments I mentioned, it's a very specific program. I only know of 2 such groups of apartments that are in New York City. It took many years of finding the right developer, OPWDD thinking it's a good idea and it would cater to people that are OPWDD eligibility, and an agency all coming together and agreeing on certain requirements in order to make this happen. So hopefully in the future, we'll see more of these opportunities, but for now, it's very, very, very limited.
Thank you so very much. And this actually concludes our question and answer period. We are going to move forward. If you do have any issues in the chat, just remember to put #support so that someone can help you. And let's move forward to our session number 3. I will hand it back over to our co-moderator, Amy Tsai.
Thank you, Christy. And thank you so much, Wendy, for sharing that. Her contact information is in the chat, so please utilize her contact and her resources. So we're going to touch on session 3 now, transitioning services from school-age children to adulthood, which is really important as we continue to discuss what it will look like. We have our speaker, Deborah Francis Pierre, referred to as Francis, has been as an educator for over 15 years. Her background in both special education and the arts has enabled her to provide dynamic support to students with disabilities throughout Brooklyn and Manhattan. Francis has attended City College, CUNY, and New York University. She holds a master's degree in special education, general education, and music education. During her spare time, she has enjoyed traveling, all facts of the arts, crocheting and making clothes, candles, and lotions. She is excited to be part of the Manhattan TCAC team as a teacher trainer. Francis, are you here? And I turn it to you to present. Thank you so much.
Everyone. Yeah, thank you so much for the introduction and thank you for having me. My name is Francis. I am from the Manhattan TCAC. We have one in every borough. Let me just start sharing my slides. So, does everyone see the slides?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, let me move this out the way. All right. So at TCAC, our mission is to support families, schools by facilitating a seamless transition for our students from school to adult life. All students are provided with experiences that foster their academic, social, emotional, and vocational growth, excellence, facilitating multiple pathways to graduation and success after high school. Here are some of our goals
I
and
don't
work.
mean to interrupt you. The presenter view is actually blocking your
Oh,
presentation.
let me stop this then. Okay, no, thank you so much for, it's hard to see what everyone can see.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, you're
All
okay.
right, let me stop this then. And let me redo it. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right, let me see. Bear with me 1 minute. Let me end the show. All right. How was this?
Perfect.
Perfect. All right. So here are some of our goals. We provide work-based learning and other vocational opportunities. We work with community-based organizations, and throughout the presentation, I'll let you know what these organizations are. We provide access to college and career learning experiences that will support attainment and/or graduation, diploma requirements, and credential options. We train school staff on the administration of age-appropriate transition assessments to inform student-centered transition planning. We engage families in the transition planning process through family-centered workshops and information sessions. And finally, we develop and lead ongoing professional development for staff in the area of college and career readiness and transition planning services. Essentially, at the Transition College and Access Centers, we are a concierge service for students with disabilities in all 5 boroughs. I am personally from the Manhattan. I work at the Manhattan borough, but we have an office in every one. We have Staten Island, Manhattan, Bronx, Queens, and Brooklyn offices. And the office that you would reach out to is in the borough that your child attends school. So if you live in Brooklyn, but your child attends a school in Manhattan, you would reach out to my office. I hope that was made clear for everyone, and I'll repeat it again. So this is just an overview of what I'm going to be discussing. All the services that we offer at TCAC, our employment services, as well as our pre-employment services. We do a lot of community connections, transition consultancies. I'm going to explain everything as we go along. We do work-based learning experiences. We have TOP, which is our training opportunities program, as well as SYEP, which is our summer youth employment program. Those applications have ended, but TOP is coming up in the fall. And then finally, we have what's called our pre-ETS, which is our pre-employment training program. I will explain what those services are, the application, and how that aligns with Access VR. Okay, so when we're thinking about hopes, dreams, and aspirations for our students, we ideally like to start with elementary school to get students thinking about what their interests are. And if they are not able to explain that, we like to observe as family members. And I'm speaking as a mother of a child who is OPWDD eligible currently. So I'm speaking from firsthand experience. As a mom, as well as a professional, it's good to see what our children's interests are right now and to help them align that with future professions or any interests and hobbies that they can build upon that can create employment opportunities for them. And then we want to look at what's occurring to make that change. Is it changing over time? What does that look like? Are we supporting their interests? Are we taking away from their interests? What are we doing as family members to help our children start really developing hobbies and interests that can lead to skills? Okay, and then we finally are going to look at what are your son's, daughter's strengths, skills, or current abilities. Okay, transition is a results-oriented process that is focused on improving the academic and functional achievement of the student with a disability to facilitate the student's movement from school to post-school activities. So when we say results-oriented, we're looking at what is this child going to be able to do and what do they need to help them do this. That's what we mean by results oriented. And post-school outcomes Activities include, but are not limited to, continuing our adult education, vocational training, employment, independent living, and community participation. And then finally, transition services are a coordinated set of activities for a student with a disability, designed with the focus on the desired outcome that are aligned in the measurable post-secondary goals. So this coordinated set of activities, these are our CTAs in the IEP. When we speak about coordinated set of activities, we're speaking in the future. The student will be attending college. The student will be attending a vocational program. When we speak about measurable post-secondary goals, this is how the student is going to obtain these goals in the future. What are they doing now to, let's say, get into a vocational program? How are we as family members and the school preparing them now? So when you come to TCAC for a transition consultancy, we review the IEP with the parent. We do not do compliance. We do not suggest what somebody should write in an IEP. We help the parent understand the IEP to better support their child. We also work with the D75 schools, the teachers, the principals, et cetera, to make sure that everything is streamlined and we're not suggesting anything that cannot be supported in the school as well as at home. All right, so this is just a brief outline of the law, Individuals with Disability Education Act, otherwise known as IDEA, or some people say IDEA. It requires the students with disabilities receive a free and appropriate education and related services designed to meet their unique needs and prepare them for future education, employment, and independent living. We discuss this because a lot of our parents were unaware that the services and supports required under law in the IEP during high school does not transfer after high school. And we want to make that very clear to parents so they have an understanding of how to plan now. So the IEP has to do with what supports the students are eligible for while in school. Okay, and this is, I'm not going to go over it, but this is when you receive the slide. You can all know what the 14 disability classifications are currently under IDEA, meaning currently this is what the federal government recognizes as disabilities that can receive, who people with these disabilities can receive specific supports. All right, so we have IDEA versus ADA. We can look at it as IDEA is what our children are entitled to while the services that our children are entitled to while they are in school. And ADA are services that they are entitled to and eligible for after school. However, they must advocate, or we as parents must advocate as much as we can on behalf of our students, because these are not guaranteed. So ADA services are not guaranteed. It means that your students, your children are eligible for it, but it does not mean they're going to get these services, whereas IDEA, they are entitled to these services. Is my cursor, is everybody able to see my mouse or cursor, or no? Okay, I want to make, thank you so much, thank you. All right, so we see here IDEA, this is what our students are entitled to, whereas ADA, this is what they're eligible for. Okay, so entitlement is based on IDEA. This means things like speech and occupational therapy or physical therapy or any services that are in the IEP. It guarantees access to education. Now, our students graduate from school, they've aged out. Now we move to ADA, eligibility. They must apply for services and supports. And then these levels of supports are determined by outside entities. For instance, let me go back. For instance, if you have a child who is going to college, when they come to TCAC, the first thing that we do if the student has been accepted to college, let's say, the first thing we help the students and the families do is contact the offices of accessibility or disability, or some of them call them student support centers or student support services. These are various names for the same thing. Your child now must go to these offices with their current IEP, meaning the most current or recent IEP that they have after they left school, and be able to say, I need these services. Again, this is where we come into eligibility. The school is not required anymore to provide these services. They will determine what services your child can get. I know in some CUNY schools like LaGuardia Community College, they provide one-on-one support. Students get extended time. They get on exams. They get to take exams in a separate location. They also get a scribe. They get someone to sit there and write notes with them or help them organize notes. These are services that we provide at TCAC where we do the research and we're able to tell families, this school does this. But I'm speaking to entitlement and eligibility because I don't want parents to be shocked when your student ages out and you're saying, how come my child is no longer receiving these services? Okay. So this is just a brief overview of transition and how it starts in elementary school, leading to middle school and high school. By law, we must start a level 1 vocational assessment by the age of 12. With this assessment, let me show you my cursor. Age of 12. Essentially, this just helps students identify some of their interests, right? What are you interested in? What do you like to do so far? And then when the student turns the age of 15, right? This is when they are now in high school, and these goals and services that align with transition, like I mentioned before, the coordinated set of activities, as well as the measurable post-secondary goals, should be in the IEP starting the year your child turns 15. So if they are currently 14 and their IEP meeting is in June, but they're turning 15 in July, you should see in their IEP some notes about their measurable post-secondary goals and the coordinated set of activities. And these notes will come directly from the student's interests, as well as those of the family members, okay? And then starting in high school, we have opportunities to participate in internships, work-based learning activities, and other employment activities. We also have credential opportunity services we'll speak to later. We partner students and families with external agencies like OPWDD, like the coordinated care management services, front door services. We help families really plan all of that and execute all of that. We determine if travel training is appropriate, and we explore and apply for college, vocational, and other programs with the families. Okay, so when you come to TCAC and we say, we're going to create a transition plan, these are all the entities that we think about, okay? Employment, recreation and leisure, transportation. Does your child need travel training? Do they know how to get from their school to home on their own? Do they know how to get from, let's say, their school to any type of employment? We ask these questions. Education and training, what is your child eligible for? May I add, we do have some programs for students who are classified with intellectual disabilities. There are college programs that they are actually eligible for, and we just in CUNY schools, and we discuss this with parents, okay? Community living, self-advocacy, and independence. Self-advocacy is at the top of our list because, as I stated before, according to the ADA, your children after they graduate are not eligible for certain services unless we advocate for them or teach them how to advocate for themselves. So this is just an overview of what we go over and all the boxes that we check when we meet for transition consultancy. How am I doing on time, by the way?
You're fine.
Okay, thank you so much. All right. So we have the transition services at TCAC, right? So we start with the transition consultancy. I'm going to go over what are they. We do self-advocacy and self-determination training for children. We also have workshops for students, families, and staff. Okay, our transition consultancies are for students with IEPs who need to be connected with adult or post-secondary services or instruction, but otherwise, recently completed school will be offered transition support consultancy services. So we provide services for students who are currently in school, as well as for students who are not in school, who have graduated or who are in between, so to speak. So we do have 21 plus assistance that we give to students. Our transition support consultancy services are individualized services. So these are not group settings. This is always one-to-one. When we meet with students, we have already reviewed, if they are in school, we have thoroughly reviewed their IEPs. We have spoken to the principal, the assistant principal, if there's a transition coordinator, we have already spoken with all these entities and the parents prior to meeting with the students. So we come with a wealth of knowledge of how to support the student. And when we meet, we're essentially sitting down to assess what are the needs. And we need to meet with the student because we need student voice. It's very important that we have student voice. Now, when we discuss student needs, employment, for instance, we connect some of our students with agencies like Bridges from School to Work, which is an independent agency that works solely on behalf of students with disabilities to find them employment, and not just temporary employment, permanent employment. They provide training, they work with the students from A to Z, they have long-standing relationships with the students. This is an organization that has been around for 30 plus years. They started out in Chicago and now they have offices in New York. Currently, we have placed 100 students this year. By this year, I mean from September to May, we have placed 100 students who are now actively employed. We also placed 101 when we were all remote from that year 2020 to 2021 with Bridges. In terms of education, if students want to be eligible for vocational programs or colleges, we do not help with the application process, meaning we sit with a child to apply. We help with gathering whatever documentation they will need. We help the students create a Gmail account if they don't already have one, and we show them how to upload their documents into a Google Drive so they have these documents for life. Their IEP, their 504s, anything related to their needs and supports, we help these students put it in Google Drive. We also help them with a digital resume. We help them apply to jobs. In terms of independent living, we help students who are OPWDD eligible access other organizations like Synergia, which provides habilitation services, respite services, etc. Okay, so here are some sample transition consultancy topics: career paths for employment, college and vocational training, housing options. These are the things I mentioned before. Financial wellness programs. We currently have a professional development opportunity for students and families where we invite attorneys who help parents create special needs trust or just teach them about a special needs trust. We also have people who work in banks who help parents and students learn about opening up a savings account and all these other financial supports. We discuss self-advocacy and self-determination, which I'm going to speak to later. align with agencies that support other domains of transition, Access VR, OPWDD support, Americans with Disabilities Act education. I did give a glimpse of that, but when we meet with families and students one-on-one, we discuss more about what that means, and college accessibility offices, which I mentioned earlier. So these are all the topics that we discuss when we go over a transition consultancy. They usually last at least an hour if we are going to go over all of this information. They can be in person or they can be conducted remotely. And if another language other than English is needed, we do offer that service. We do offer translators. Okay, so what is self-advocacy? This is why this is important. This is why we're discussing this. We help our students speak up for themselves. We also help our families learn how to speak on behalf of their children. We help our children know what their rights and responsibilities are, and reaching out to others when they need help or friendship. This is especially important when we're helping our children in terms of employment. We are not going to be at their jobs with them. So how are they going to advocate for themselves? How are they going to ask for help? How are they going to say, I need extra supports? And this is what we do following our transition consultancies. So we'll have our consultancies, but it doesn't stop there. We continue the services. And then we have self-determination. We help our children believe in themselves and know what their interests are and help them align their interests with their future goals. We help them see the small steps. So that's executive functioning that we were talking about earlier. We help our students plan out and organize their steps. We help them know what supports that they may need to help them take control of their lives. Some of these things can include deciding what to wear, how to spend their free time, or where to work. Currently, well, most recently, we worked with a group of students who either had autism or ID, and they are now all employed. This is really great. They're all able to speak to what their interests are. They have done some career assessments with us, and we had one student who wanted to be a software designer, saw what that entailed, and now the student is currently enrolled in a program that they're learning more about software security systems. Okay, so through our support and working with the schools and the families, we're able to help students figure out what it is that they're interested in and align this interest with actual employment and/or education. Okay, so I'm just going to go over this quickly. These are some of the workshops that we cover. So with students, we go over college considerations. By that, we mean, what grades do you need? What colleges are out there? How much do they cost? What is the cost to family members? What is the cost to you? Where are the Office of Accessibility or Disability offices? How are you going to speak up for yourself in class? How are you going to speak up for yourself if you need to go to these offices? How do we make friends? How do we sustain relationships? We go over interview skills and, of course, the digital resume that I mentioned earlier. With families, we discuss post-secondary funding options like FAFSA, and other things like the Special Need Trust and things that I mentioned before. We also discuss rehabilitation and rehabilitation organizations and digital resume as well. With our staff, now we also train staff in transition planning, specifically in the transition areas of the measurable post-secondary goals and the coordinated set of activities. Remember, the CTAs are what your children will be able to do, and the measurable post-secondary goals are how they're going to get there. We also provide culturally responsive transition planning for staff. And this is where we help staff include the cultural needs of the families and be quite sensitive to their circumstances. Okay, so in the area of employment, as I mentioned before, the summer youth employment applications have been closed and coming up In the fall, we will have TOP, otherwise known as Training Opportunities Program. And it is a work-based learning experience designed to support schools in providing work-based learning experiences that align with students' measurable post-secondary goals. So this is work that students do at school. This is quite amazing. I know in some schools, specifically the high schools, the students run, let's say like a little shop where they sell snacks to the teachers and other students. Well, they can get paid for things like this. Sometimes students are there before school starts and they collect maybe like the attendance sheets and they distribute it to each teacher. So with each school, they design what the work is, but this is really important for students to have this opportunity. They really enjoy it. They love that level of responsibility. They love being needed, and they love knowing that they have a skill that makes them employable. This also adds to their resume. Right? I worked, I did this, these are what my skills are. And when our students are active in TOP or SYEP, we help them see what their specific skills are so they can be able to verbally express that in their interviews, let's say, as well as write it down in their resume, okay? So when it will open up again in September, and the applications will close in by December 1st. We have our pre-employment training services. These are great services. I find them to be great. They're for students ages 14 to 21. They must have a current IEP or 504 plan. This program I find really wonderful because it's in group settings as well as one-to-one services for students to help them figure out, what am I going to do if I have a job? How am I going to speak to my employees? If I'm at work, am I going to have my cell phone out all day and look at my cell phone? If I'm working at Target, let's say, and someone asks for help, will I be able to help them, or will I be able to, will I run away? Will I shy away? We have all of these great conversations. We do a lot of mock interviews. We actually invite employers into some of the sessions to talk about what they're looking for with students. And these sessions take place after school. They are fully remote. Students create their schedules with their teachers. It's offered in English, French, and Spanish. We are looking to offer it in different languages as it expands. And this is a really great program. We do field trips as well once things are fully operating. And this is a really wonderful experience. We practice self-advocacy, workplace readiness, how do you dress to work, post-secondary training, and job and career exploration, as well as the work-based learning piece that I spoke about. I really love this program. Our students who are currently in this really appreciate the ability to speak to people one-to-one, as well as speak to other students about what working is like and how am I going to behave, and they speak through their fears and their anxieties and their concerns. All right, now these are just some links to other agencies and entities that we support families with. We have Include NYC, Bridges is the employment company, Opportunities for a Better Tomorrow, Brooklyn Educational Opportunity Center, the CUNY Disability Services for those who have children who are going to college. This brings you to the front door for OPWDD, Access VR, and Pathways to Graduation for students who need more support in getting a high school diploma. These are our other links here, Advocates for Children that we work with, and D79 programs. And here's our link to our professional catalog, our pre-EDS application. And if you want a transition consultancy, here's a link to request that from all 5 boroughs. And this is just a nice little reflection quote. Without a healthy sense of control, Kids feel powerless and overwhelmed and will often become passive or resigned. When they are denied the ability to make meaningful choices, they are at high risk of becoming anxious, struggling to manage anger, becoming self-destructive, or self-medicating. So we always bring this reflection quote up to really help parents such as myself really make sure that we are making our students at the center of our choices, because it really is all about them. All right, so any questions?
Yes.
Is this the question time?
Yes, this is the question time. Thank you so
Perfect.
much, Francis.
Thank you.
So we're just gonna repeat the instructions a little bit, because we just want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to ask a question. So if you have a question and you have not spoken yet, we ask that you raise your hand or you put it in the chat. And then those that have asked questions, you're feel free to ask questions as well. We just want to make sure that this space is open for everyone. Please don't be shy to ask a question. There's never a wrong answer to anything or a bad question. So Christy M. or Craig, is there any questions in the chat? We will take one from there, and then if there's a raised hand, we'll take another one from after that. And Francis, if you want to just stop your sharing, it would be really nice to see the community.
No worries.
Together. Thanks.
Thank you.
I see a hand raised, but Christy, do we have any chat questions? I know you've been chatting.
I don't see any at this time.
Okay, so we can just go to the hand raised.
What was it? Audrey's iPad. I'm gonna go ahead and
Hi, Dr. Francis. Thank you so much. That was so much information. Do we make appointments to come in?
Yes. So you'll get I believe you'll get the, I'll give it to Christy, I believe, a PDF version of the PowerPoint, which will have live links and you can click on everything. You can either call our offices or you'll see a form to request a transition consultancy.
Fantastic.
And this can be done remotely. You don't actually have to come to the office if you don't want to.
Oh, great.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, and we do offer evening hours for transition consultancies because we understand that we have to be flexible.
You guys thought of everything.
We try.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
No worries.
I have a question for you,
You
Francis.
Yes.
What resources are available to support the students to receive eligible vouchers and benefits to support individuals with disabilities for independence?
What do you mean by vouchers?
Just different services. You know how with with the brokers, with the front door, there's certain things where it can be paid for without the parent's pocket, etc.
So here's what we do, and because I'm a parent and I understand the process, what I first advise parents to do is collect all the documents. It is a very long process and it can get longer if you do not have everything. So at TCAC, we help the parents collect the documents. We also connect them with a coordinator care manager who then takes over from us and does all the rest of the support services. So in terms of vouchers, I can never say you're going to get this. All I can tell parents is you may be eligible for this. Right. And then I can give them firsthand knowledge, having a child who is OPWDD eligible, who's fairly young. I can say because of my son's age, he's 4 years old. He's only eligible currently for this services. That can be, I can have somebody who can come to our home and help him with speech services, et cetera, et cetera. As he gets older, the levels of support change and OPWDD determines that. And this is what I share with families. So they don't, they're not disappointed when OPWDD says, hey, we don't believe based on your child's level of need that you need this, that, and the third. What I do impress upon parents is to say before the front door process, to highlight what you know you're going to need. And we do give them a list of services so they know how to verbally say it and try to get that going in on the front end.
Thank you for that. Do we have any further questions in the chat, Craig or Christy?
I didn't see.
Yes, I actually got a mess. Someone might have messaged me directly instead of to everyone. So I'm just going to read that question. Just bear with me.
Okay.
Is self-direction a better option for services TCAC provides?
I'm unclear as what that means. Is self-direction a better option?
I'm
unclear as to what the parent is asking.
Audrey, are you able to maybe unmute and elaborate on your question?
Raise your hand so I could see. So I don't see any hands. Was it the same Audrey that asked? Oh, there we go.
Yeah, there it is.
Audrey, are you able to unmute yourself?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, I apologize. I don't know what just went wrong there. I know I'm hearing about self-direction.
Yeah.
We have a straight OPWDD waiver. So he gets all the other services. It comes through OPWDD. And I'm trying to understand if I should try to do self-direction, would that provide more opportunities in terms of what I can get for him, or do I just stick with OPWDD the way it is?
I would advise the self-direction. It does give you more options and more control over what you can choose and who you can choose.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
We have a hand up from Joanne. Joanne, are you able to unmute yourself?
Yes, I am now. Good afternoon. I have a question in relation to working papers and a program that's surrounded around having a shadow mentor with, if they are allowed to be employed, do you have a program that offers a shadowing mentor? If they do get employed at a job, there's usually someone that mentors them, that works alongside of them, et cetera. So my two questions are, do you offer any assistance around working papers? Because I was told that is needed. And secondly, is there a program that you can, or your consulting firm offers in relation to assistance while working, if they do get employed, transitional students?
Right. Okay. So in terms of working papers, if the child is currently in school, that has to be done through school. We are a DOE office, but we are not allowed to distribute or help students with working papers. That has to be done through school. And that is because of the medical physical required, or the medical forms required to receive working papers. I know for the older age group that has been waived, but for the younger age group, meaning 14 to 15, a medical form is still required, and that has to be collected from the school. I don't know which entities in the school does that. Sometimes it's parent coordinators, sometimes it's transition coordinators. So that you would have to find out from the school themselves. What was the second part? Is she able to unmute? Joanne?
Joanne, are you able to unmute yourself?
Okay, now I am. It was a little shaky there, but thank you. So the second part to my question was around any programs that you can offer.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so we don't offer the programs. We align students with a program. So it's called Bridges from School to Work. And they do have a mentoring program where they offer pre-employment services as well as they help the students while they're currently employed. They do not go to the job, but they do speak with their employer, and they have an open line of communication to make sure that the child is doing well at work. And this is until the child decides they no longer want the assistance. So there's no expiration date on the support.
Okay, that's perfect. I appreciate those answers. Now, this is just one last caveat to what I was asking. My son already has a virtual resume, which is most of the studies and programs that he's doing is within the school, within his transitional program, leading him up to once he transitions. So the virtual resume is already there. I just have to work on getting the working papers through the school, you're saying, because they never even mentioned that. So I appreciate that.
Oh, no worries. Thank you.
We are going to go back to the question about self-direction. So I'm going to let Christy support in, if possibly, answer that question. She, in her professional career, does self-direction. So Christy, you can support that.
She's a transition committee chair.
Hi, everyone. So yes, in my professional career, I am a self-direction broker. So I do have extensive knowledge on self-direction. So I'll just give a brief definition. I don't want to get, because we could be here all day talking about self-direction. I would love for our transition committee to host another session on self-direction. We did have one in March, which was very, very thorough, but I think, it's always something that's needed. So I'll definitely get that set up again with the transition committee. So self-direction is basically a term for when you have Medicaid waiver, which a lot of you have your waiver enrolled, you can choose to self-direct those waiver services. And, there is a responsibility on the parent and advocate because it is self-direction. You're essentially going to be the director of your child services. And so instead of having your care manager handle all of those services, you and your broker and your care manager and your FI, you all form a circle of support, and you determine a budget for your child, basically, curated to all of their needs with your team. So you're in charge of the budget with your broker and your FI, and you handpick all the programs. There are rules and regulations, obviously, of what classes and services and rates for your staff and things like that. There's a lot of regulations you need to follow, but essentially you're making your own plan for your child, where you're hiring your own staff, deciding how many hours per week staff is going to work. You're deciding what programs, community classes you want your child to attend. And there's a lot of different categories of the budget. So like I said, I don't want to get into every category and what can be covered here, but I definitely highly recommend attending one of the OPWDD self-direction info sessions as well, as they'll go over, everything that's available there. But there are a lot of opportunities to utilize your child's Medicaid waiver budget through self-directing.
Thank you so much, Christy. And we'll definitely continue the conversation of self-direction and how these services can benefit families as we continue to dive deep into it. I do want to, because we also have another session before we end this conference. So we want to make sure that, people are here leaving with knowing their rights. So just before we go to the next session, I wanted to just ask a question as to what is the supports and access for students and families that are interested in making sure that they have financial literacy before they look into any of these pathways toward independence and to post-secondary institutions. If you can share just a little bit, Francis, I think parents would just want to be more comfortable and have that foundation of skills moving forward.
Amy, were you asking me a question?
Yeah, around financial literacy. I know that
Yeah.
TCAC does workshops, but what kind of access can students and families be able to get that?
What kind of access? So it's in our catalog. You can either call us, we can tailor it to a family group, like a PTA meeting or something like this, we can come back and speak like this. We would like more or less 4 weeks in advance notice, so we can invite attorneys, we can invite people who work in banks, or if we're not going to invite them, we just need a 2-week notice. And mostly the special needs trust is covered at length and all the options around that.
Thank you. And
worries.
will any of these areas of workshops be also in different languages? We also want to make sure that families who are multilingual language learners are part of the inclusiveness for information.
Right, because of the notice, I failed to mention that if you tell us we need these languages, we'll invite our DOE translators to the session.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We definitely don't want to make sure everyone's a part of this and that their journey through transitioning is a safe one, and also that they can have the supports they want.
Right.
Appreciate it.
Got one last little quick. You have the locations of the other TCAC and other boroughs, the addresses?
Yeah, when I will email Christy with my PDF of the PowerPoint, and it will have all 5 boroughs with the website links, phone numbers, and addresses.
Thank you so much.
No worries.
Christy, we will turn it over to you to moderate the next and last session. Appreciate it.
I was actually trying to drop the TCAC location, so give me a second. I can do that momentarily. Thank you so much, Francis. That was a great presentation. It was very empowering and a lot of knowledge and resources for our parents. I'm going to make sure that we get all of the different things that she has put into the chat out to our members of the audience here and to make them available online. So moving forward, our next session is Knowing Your Legal Rights and Special Needs Planning. The speaker is Mrs. Orma MP Reynolds, Esquire. She is a special education law and children's advocate. And she is an attorney and has founded her own virtual law practice called MSR Legal and Consulting Services. Although she opened up her practice full-time in September 2019, she has been practicing special education law since 2008. Over the course of her career, Ms. MP Reynolds has worked for the Bronx Legal Services, the DOE, Garcio and Garcio, LLP, and Gersh Academy. She represents parents of children with disabilities in New York City, Long Island, and Lower Westchester. Amongst the issues addressed is Ms. MP Reynolds practice are least restrictive environments, student discipline, independent educational evaluations, private school tuition funding, compensatory education, and additional services. Consultations may be booked on her website, www.msrlegal.org, and we will also have her Instagram and other information that will be dropped into the chat shortly. And on that note, I will turn it over to Ms. MP Reynolds to move on and move forward with the session. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate this opportunity, Ms. Angel, to address your citywide committee and, hopefully shed some light on some of the rights that parents do have with respect to the special education process. I'm going to share my screen so you can see my PowerPoint. I did email Ms. Angel the PowerPoint in case anyone would be interested in having a copy of it, but let me just see if this works. Share, and I'm gonna, from the beginning. Okay, are you guys able to see this PowerPoint?
Yes.
It's showing, okay, great. I'm not the most technologically advanced, but I am running a virtual practice. So yes, as Ms. Angel said, I'm the founder of a special education special needs law practice, MSR Legal and Consulting Services. Those initials MSR actually stand for my children's first names, Madison, Scarlett, and Riley, 2 of which have IEPs and 1 who is OPWDD eligible. When I started this working in this field, I wasn't a parent. I just kind of fell into it and fell in love with it. And now using the skills myself that I've learned over the past 14 years. So this first slide is just a list of all of the topics that I hope to cover. I'm going to go through each one pretty quickly because of the time constraints, but each of these topics could be its own hour-long presentation. So just understand that I am touching the surface. And in terms of this presentation, I have some fine print on the bottom of my first intro slide that this is not considered legal advice. This is for, general informational purposes, community education for the public, and that there's no attorney-client relationship being formed by virtue of me, responding to a specific question. I just have to give that disclaimer. So consent and confidentiality. So I start here because this is really where it all begins. And for all of the parents here that have children with IEPs, you should have been, given informed consent of the evaluations and why they're being proposed and what the evaluation will look like of your child. It's important to note that consent to evaluate is not the same thing as consent to the provision of special education services. So it's really a two-part process, and you don't necessarily need to get to that second part. A lot of parents, don't really realize it, and they're like, no, I don't even want to have my child evaluated or reevaluated. But it's interesting, this is embedded in the law and the commissioner's regulations covering children with special needs, that you can consent to evaluation and not necessarily consent to the actual service. Of course, that not allowing the service to actually take place, let's say, consenting to a speech evaluation, but not allowing your child to receive the actual speech therapy. Of course, down the road, that can potentially pose issues if your child ends up struggling, and then now you're looking to figure out how to catch your child up. But those are definitely two different consents, and I do like to let families and individuals who help work with families know that consent to one is not necessarily consent to the other. Prior written notice is very, very important. So as you all know, you sit through the IEP meeting and you, there's discussion, of course, about the different parts and what your child functioning levels are and what they need. But the prior written notice is really the DOE's kind of final notice of recommendations. It's usually accompanied by a school location letter for public school students, 5 and up. And this is really what you will receive and know, okay, this is what the DOE is intending to offer my child as an appropriate set of programming and services based on the education. And another reason why that prior written notice is important is if you end up disagreeing with this, ultimate recommendation, it's really just important to know what that recommendation is, and that is what the prior written notice, or PWN, does. And then, a slightly controversial point, but I am in favor of giving families information and having them come to their conclusion. Families do have the right to revoke consent altogether to special education. In my 14 years, I've only seen it happen once, where a parent wanted to sort of decertify or declassify her child from special ed services, from IEP services, altogether. And of course, it's a huge decision and something that should not be taken lightly. And there could be potentially, consequences again to taking that position. But it's important to know, even though the Department of Education wouldn't be able to force you by, let's say, an impartial hearing against you to, force the parent to continue with special education, there are potentially, child welfare consequences that the parents should be made aware of. if the mandated reporter feels like the parent is sort of standing in the way of the child receiving an adequate education, and that's where education neglect referrals can happen. So language access, you have the right to meaningful participation in this CSC process, the Committee on Special Education's process of developing an IEP and finding the right school placement that can implement the IEP. So to that end, there should be translators at or an interpreter at the IEP meeting. The regulations say that districts should make every effort possible to make sure that the meetings are taking place in the parent's native language, if that would otherwise pose a barrier to the parent participating in the meeting. At an impartial hearing, which I'll go into later on, you do have the right to an interpreter at the expense of the Department of Education. And for your child, I see this with recent immigrants, there's the option of, or the option available of bilingual instruction and bilingual speech and language therapy. It's all based on your child's needs. And there are programs that do offer, I've seen, Spanish language and Mandarin, and there may be some other languages as well. So I like to think of language access not only for the parent, but also potentially for the child, him or herself. So this is a big one, the free appropriate public education. So we use this acronym, as you guys know, parents know, there are a lot of acronyms in special education, but this is the most important one, FAPE, the free appropriate public education. So we know free means that it should be at no cost to the parent. So just like you say your neighbor who has a child without a disability doesn't need to pay for her child to get a proper education, you as a special needs parent shouldn't have to pay either. So it's sort of like an equality or equitable thing with the no cost to the parent. Appropriate is where I do all of my litigation because it's so specific to the child. So there's a lot of case law, like judges' decisions that have molded what it means to be appropriate. But at its most basic level, the services have to be tailored to your child's needs. When I'm reviewing an IEP, I'm looking if the parent is telling me, their child is a non-speaking child, then I'm looking to see if there are, strategies and goals relating to functional communication or, things like assistive technology, and we'll get into that. But it's got to be tailored to your child's needs, right? It shouldn't be sort of a template form, in terms of the IEP. We should be looking at your child's functioning levels and seeing how we can help make that child make progress or demonstrate progress over usually a calendar year. Related services are very much a part of the appropriateness of the IEP. A related service is any service that a child needs in order to access or benefit from the instruction. So I put therapies because that's, a lot of us are really familiar with OT, PT, and speech therapy. But transportation is a related service as well. So the ability of your child to get from your home to the school is a related service. And so that's why certain IEPs have different transportation accommodations and, wheelchair lifts and a transportation aid. I even did a case where we had an aid that could bring the child from the door of their apartment down their walk up, because the child was in a wheelchair, and the parent and the home health aide weren't really able to do that kind of transportation. So, I put that there because it's really important. Also the length of the bus ride as well. Assistive technology, I see it most commonly in the context of communication, but under the law, it's broader than that. So I am working, for example, on a case where We're trying to look at assistive technology in assisting a child's mobility needs and a certain chair, adaptive chair or adaptive stroller within the school environment to really enable that child to participate more fully in the instruction. And of course, nursing services, paraprofessional services, all of that has to, go into the child's ability to access and learn in the classroom. And appropriate means it has to be able to produce progress and not regression. And this may sound, like a really simple, a concept that, shouldn't be worth saying at all, but it is because, we see IEPs where sometimes from year to year, it's not changing, and yet the child is still not making progress. And so, there was a relatively recent, like 5 years ago, a US Supreme Court case that talked about how, the district is on the hook here. You can't just kind of like copy and paste last year's IEP and keep it moving for this child who has not made progress. So something has to change, in the IEP, in this placement. And that case, it's called the Endrew case, ENDREW case. That's where the Supreme Court, US Supreme Court, talked about how the goals have to be challenging and ambitious in light of the child's circumstances. So it just we can't just be creating these IEPs just for the purpose of doing that without a real mission in mind that we do want to see progress, see demonstrable academic or pre-academic progress or physical developmental progress in the child from year to year. And to that end, sometimes we do have to create goals that are going to push, not only the child, but the educators in the room to really help that child achieve what they should be achieving. Otherwise, the education will look more like, okay, this is just childcare. This is not, education if we're not pushing the child in that right direction. And public education, it means it's aligned with grade level content standards for children who are in special classes. For example, it's, the grade level content standards have to be broken down and modified to a level that the child can understand and access. And then meaningful parental participation, I bring that up again. The Department of Education, just speaking, to you parents out there, has to afford you meaningful parental participation. So you shouldn't feel like you're walking into an IEP meeting where everything has already been thought up and planned out, even before you step foot or offered an opinion, and that you should feel that it's a space where you can voice your opinion. And I talk more about that on the next slide. So in terms of your rights with respect to the IEP, you have the right to share reports from outside providers. So often I see parents wanting to bring their outside, if they have private insurance and their child's getting ABA, applied behavioral analysis therapy outside of school. Sometimes they'll bring that supervisor to talk at the IEP meeting. Sometimes they'll bring a prescription from their developmental pediatrician who's recommending a certain number of therapy sessions or a certain teaching methodology. I see that with my clients on the autism spectrum, but you do have the right to do that. And I encourage families, if they do have reports or outside information to share that has bearing on the child's education, to share that in advance, with whoever the administrator is for that IEP meeting. You also have the right to bring a family member, an advocate, an attorney, if you feel that's warranted. The law is really clear on that you can bring the support person or, team that you need, as long as they have, you know, specialized knowledge about your child, and can really serve as a productive member of this committee, the Committee on Special Education. And another thing, you're allowed to give suggestions on the goals. So sometimes the annual goals are glossed over, you know, by the parent, because it can seem like very heavy, like we're talking about like the number of times a child is going to do something within, you know, at 80% accuracy level within 4 months. It can sound all very technical, but nothing stops a parent or their advocate from saying, you know what, I don't really get all of these different terms that you're using, but I'm concerned that my child doesn't know the alphabet, you know, or I'm concerned that my child hasn't learned to pull down his pants at the potty, you know, and so I want a goal about that. And that's absolutely your right to raise your real world practical concerns in your own voice. And they are supposed to address it. That's what it's, you know, comes down to in terms of meaningful participation. In various sections of the IEP, there'll be like a parental concerns section. You know, for preschoolers, for example, it's kind of spread out between some of the different sections, you know, the parental concerns about physical development, academic development. And when I, you know, attend IEP meetings on behalf of clients and even for my own children, I can say, you know, please note in the parental concern section that I have an issue with this or that I disagree with that. And they are supposed to note that. And I see that, you know, often in IEPs that the parent disagrees or the parent feels this child needs X, Y, and Z. And so that way it's documented that you had concerns, you tried to raise them, and that can help if you end up having to take the next steps, which I will, you know, talk about in the next couple of slides. But you don't have to agree with the special education recommendations. So if everything goes well, you won't need me necessarily, you know, if you feel like the IEP developed is appropriate and you go and visit whatever placements are offered and it looks like it'll be a safe environment, therapeutic environment for your child, then there's really no need to necessarily disagree. You give it a shot and see how that works. And so oftentimes that can be the advice that I give families, like, you know what, it kind of looks like a solid IEP. You know, you didn't tell me there was anything glaring when you went to visit the school, if they're still giving visits. I know certain schools have, you know, COVID policies. But if it's the opposite, if you walk out of that, you know, virtual IEP meeting and you're like, oh my goodness, I really felt like I wasn't heard. I really am concerned that they're not recommending this particular therapy that his doctor is recommending. You just know that you don't have to agree to the services. This plays into kind of the consent confidentiality slide, but more so this plays into kind of moving forward what rights parents have when they do disagree. So issues of least restrictive environment, this is embedded in all of the laws covering special education, from the federal down to the local, you know, regulations. Your child has the right to be educated in the least restrictive environment, the least restrictive environment in which he or she can learn. So that's really the qualifier is, you know, a parent may want their child in a general education setting, but we have to think about what is the least restrictive in which that child can really meaningfully access the learning and education. And, you know, there's a whole continuum, you know, from general education all the way through home and hospital instruction is like the most restrictive. In between is where we have, you know, some District 75 schools. We have, you know, day programs that are state approved, residential programs as well. And, you know, this is an important piece. I've been, I think as times are changing and society is looking more progressively at the issue of integrating children with disabilities with children who don't have learning differences, or, you know, maybe not identified learning differences. I am seeing more often some families asking, you know, for the child to be in some sort of inclusion setting. And I know the DOE has or is piloting certain programs with that regard. But in terms of knowing your rights, it's, you know, least restrictive environment is a pretty important one. I think it really stems from back in the 70s, where when these laws came about, the you know, special education grew out of the civil rights movement, you know, racial segregation and integration. And then the disability rights groups started popping up and saying, well, what about us? You know, we've been segregated as well. And, you know, being close to home is a consideration. Interacting with typically developing children is a consideration. You know, proximity, the zone school, your local community school. And so you're kind of in the position as a parent of thinking, well, going along the continuum, at which point is it that my child is in the least restrictive environment? And, you know, all of those considerations, also the size, the class ratios are embedded in this concept of, you know, making sure that the child is not unnecessarily placed in a special class with only other children with IEPs. So the independent educational evaluation, this is a big one, at least in my practice. You have the right to disagree with your child's evaluation each time an evaluation is conducted. And the evaluations are important because those are what serve the basis usually of the IEP developed. And so if your child had a bad day or series of bad days, or you just felt like the evaluator's report doesn't quite capture your child and how you view your child and your child's needs, you have the right to disagree. And I think that this is actually a really powerful tool, advocacy tool and litigation tool in our toolbox for parents who are, you know, looking for something different than what the district may be offering. You can think of an independent evaluation as a second opinion. Like if you went to a doctor, you got a diagnosis and you're like, well, I need a second opinion. And you can think of it in that way. And that second opinion has to be discussed and brought to the CSC, you know, and to determine whether changes need to be made to the IEP. So independent means that it's a non-DOE employee. It'll be at, you know, publicly funded at the DOE's expense. And if you find the right provider, that independent evaluator can actually clarify certain diagnoses. Like sometimes I have families that are, I think my child might be dyslexic, or I think my child has ADHD, but they just never had the means to kind of narrow down or rule out certain diagnoses. In certain cases, an independent neuropsychological evaluation can do that. And from an advocacy standpoint, I like the independent evaluations because they usually come with recommendations for strategies and teaching methodologies that would be effective for your child. So unlike sometimes the evaluations we see from school districts, where there's an analysis of the child's testing results and functioning levels, at the end, usually those evaluations say, you know, and we defer recommendations to the CSC, you know, to determine what IEP services may be available. With the independent evaluations, you get recommendations like your child needs ABA, or your child needs an extended year program, you know, or your child has autism and ADHD and needs compensatory education. So it is a sometimes overlooked but very powerful tool. So I wanted to throw in here some special education rights with respect to being disciplined. And I don't know how often this is happening in the District 75 network, but you know, to the extent a child is suspended for a period longer than 10 days or has been suspended cumulatively for a period for more than 10 school days, there should be a superintendent's suspension hearing whenever school is seeking a long-term suspension, or it's called a long-term suspension. And if your child has a disability or being suspected of having a disability, there should be what's called an MDR. We call that here in New York City the manifestation determination review, which should look like an IEP meeting where the team is looking at the alleged misconduct and in relation to your child's disability, and determining whether there's like a substantial relationship between the two, because the idea is that your child shouldn't be punished for behaviors or conduct that's pretty much out of their control. And the MDR, if it's done properly, should be an opportunity where that the committee decides to move beyond punishment, but also tweaking the IEP and considering changes to the behavior intervention plan, or for the first time conducting a functional behavior assessment. So that all of that happens if things are done the way they should be done. Your child does have the right to IEP services during long-term suspensions, and that's always something that may not happen, I guess. It's hard to kind of recreate a special education classroom when a child is on suspension, but there is, in terms of your rights, an expedited impartial hearing process. It's a process that should, from start to finish, be completed within 30 days, where you can appeal sort of the MDR results. So if the result is that they say there's no nexus, there's no connection between your child's, having ADHD and pushing a child, near a window, then there are things that you can do to appeal. One of them is this expedited due process hearing with respect to the suspension, and also the receipt of services during the suspension. So due process. So this is like a very charged legal term, but essentially I describe it as, if your child has this legal right to an appropriate education in New York State. It's a constitutional right to be educated under the New York State Constitution. And before a government entity, such as a school district, can violate your rights or impedes on this right, you have the right to challenge it. And so that's kind of what due process is all about. There are different ways in which a parent can, disagree and challenge and ask for something else. The simplest way is really the reevaluation. Some parents say, I think my child really needs a paraprofessional. This is ridiculous. I'm getting called every day to pick up the child, and yet they keep denying me the paraprofessional, and now I'm going to lose my job because I can't go to work, that whole thing. And I always say, well, try and get some letter and support from an outside provider before you ask to reopen the case. But that is, one of the like a starting point, I think, in terms of advocating for your child. There's mediation. Again, like each of these could be its own PowerPoint presentation, but that is supposed to be a non-adversarial process in which both sides get together with a neutral person, the mediator, to try and come to an agreement on what changes to be made. We usually don't see anything that involves private funding, private schools, private tuition, or tutoring, or ABA services that cannot really be addressed in the mediation, because the individual sent to represent the DOE often doesn't have that legal authority to bind the the DOE to fund things of that nature. A state complaint is good for alleged violations of patterns and practices, or just an overall violation of your child's rights beyond what, the individualized, services you want your child to receive, but to just let the state know, like, well, this is what they're doing, and this is what the school district's doing, and it's a violation, and the state comes and does an investigation and interviews both sides, and then comes up with a finding of whether or not the district has violated or is violating special education laws. The impartial hearing is really where I practice the most, because that is the most targeted venue for your child's needs, where you're not kind of limited to only changes within the IEP, but it can go beyond that to things like private compensatory education funding and private school potentially, and after school services. So I see my slide. Okay, I hope you guys can see the whole thing, but compensatory education, since I've, been doing this virtually since the pandemic, this is huge. It's still huge. I still see, when I'm reviewing records, IEPs, where the child is not, there's documented, evidence that the child didn't really access the remote learning for a whole variety of reasons: disability, age, behavior, lack of someone who can facilitate that. So it's important to note in New York City that the statute of limitations has been told, meaning it's kind of like the clock stopped between March 2020 and November 2020. This is very technical, but typically a parent only has 2 years to raise concerns about their child's education. So the information I'm putting forth here, which is not necessarily legal advice, is get your claims in before November 2022 because of that 2-year statute of limitations. If you're looking for makeup services to make up for past denials of FAPE, of the free appropriate education. With compensatory education, there's quantitative approaches and qualitative approaches. By quantitative, I've done cases where it is, the parents like, my child missed 50 seconds of, 50 sessions of speech, and I want all 50 sessions back. Qualitative approach is more thinking as a whole. When my child didn't really access remote learning by the special ed teacher over the course of 2 or 3 years, so I want to make up for that. And I think that having private sets by an ABA trained teacher is what my child needs to make up for that deficit. So again, all of this is a lot that can be addressed in its own PowerPoint, but I just wanted to touch on all of it. And now, beyond after school beyond compensatory education, which is really specifically to make up for past denials of FAPE, there are kids who just automatically, somewhat automatically, need the after school services. So a child's school day doesn't necessarily need to end at 2:30 when they get on the bus to go home. I have a lot of clients who have additional support, as long as, it works for the family, in terms of their childcare arrangements and dynamics, to have an outside provider, funded by the Department of Education, come in and work on all of these skills, toileting, communication, self-regulation. For my older kids, travel training and community skills. Under the law, the standard is that it has to be necessary. It has to be like a necessary component of the child's special education program, so that without it, the child won't make progress. So it is a pretty, high standard to meet. But when you think about the possibilities of, instead of coming home and dealing with your child yourself, along with all, if you have other children or other work obligations, you can have a trained individual, free of cost, coming in and helping with all of these skills to transfer them over. And I, most commonly see it, with ABA, the Applied Behavior Analysis for the children on the spectrum. And then private school tuition, this is like the most complex of the, remedies or relief that parents have available in terms of the advocacy and litigation involved, but I did want to bring it up. So you essentially are kind of thinking like, is my child one of those children who just doesn't quite fit into the special class ratios that are offered? Is my child, not quite a 12:1, but 8:1, would it fit for him, or are they somewhat in between some of these, in between a 12:1 in a community school versus a larger class, inclusion class in a District 75 program? So these are all kind of the conversations that are had, at least between myself and parents, where they feel like they want to take this step and look outside of the public school system. Does your child require a particular teaching methodology? So like my clients with dyslexia, which is now called like a specific reading disorder in, it's specific learning disability in reading, or in Gillingham or Wilson reading or methodologies. Of course, there's ABA for autism, floor time, just different teaching methodologies that may not be fully present and utilized in your child's current school. But if you do have that evidence that your child really requires this, either through an outside evaluation or a medical report, that could be something that can add to a case for funding. And there are two different types of private schools. There are the ones that are approved by New York State. They're called sometimes NPS, non-public schools, which the DOE through their central base support team can identify if they do kind of go through this analysis and feel like there's no public school that can meet this child's needs. And then there are non-state approved independent schools that are out there that target different disabilities, and a lot of them are in Manhattan, a few in Brooklyn, more popping up in Queens, very few in the Bronx. Unfortunately, there's one, no, I don't think there's one, at least a non-state approved independent school in Staten Island. But there are schools out there, and families sometimes come across, they start Googling like, autism school or dyslexia school, and some of these schools will pop up, and that kind of kickstarts the research that the parent has. So I know I went over my time. There was extensive discussion about transition planning. In terms of your right, the whole goal is to have your child be able to lead as productive a life as possible after high school. The vocational assessments should be happening at around age 12, the transition planning, that IEP in which that school year where the child's turning 15. Your child also has the right to start to be invited to attend these meetings if you feel that is what is appropriate in those circumstances. And I've done cases for private transition services. If you feel like your child needs more than what's offered, there is potentially, ABA type or, private agencies that can, take on that role after school of doing the travel training and vocational training. And then lastly, your child's eligible, as long as he or she hasn't graduated with a diploma, eligible for an IEP until they're 21. And that's it. And this is my contact information. I'm sorry for going over, but I'm, ready to take any questions.
This was very valuable information. Do we have anyone that wants to raise their hand for a question? I checked the chat. There isn't anything so far. I do have a question while we wait for a question. Could you explain the necessity or why it would be good to have the special needs trust funds?
Yes, absolutely. So I think it becomes more important as the child is growing up and reaching that transition into adulthood. So now, like through OPWDDs, like there are different waivers. For example, the parent's income can be kind of taken out of the equation in terms of how, whether the child would qualify for like, Medicaid services. And I think the importance with the special needs trust is like if your child does end up having some income or inheritance, something that would impact their eligibility for income-based government assistance like Medicaid or I think SSI, I guess, other food stamps, things of that nature, that putting that kind of like just thinking of it in a very like simplistic way is like putting that excess income away so that it's not shown when the government is, whatever agency is looking like, okay, how much, in assets does this individual have, can enable the child to qualify for, those government benefits that are needed for their, survival. And at the same time, still have access through the trustee for, their care through the special needs trust. So, special needs planning, it's important, especially as, we enter into those transition years, the teenage years, and, being practical and thinking like, well, yes, my child, you think like child's always going to live under my roof and I'm going to be able to take care of all of their needs, but then what happens if that's not the case, and we never know what. So it's almost like trying to be able to set the child up to, when you're not capable of being their everything and primary caregiver. And, it's a separate legal process. The child for special needs or supplemental trust, there is a certification, there has to be a medical certification, I think by 2 different doctors certifying the developmental disability, and the trustee or the proposed, trustee has to, the family members have to be notified also that this is happening so that they potentially have a voice or a say, and, the appropriateness of whoever ends up being designated. There's the succession planning of like what happens after that, individual with a disability, passes on, and who ends up being that contingent beneficiary. And there was a case actually that I had looked at fairly recently where a judge said that this particular young woman, didn't need kind of like the type of guardianship over property and person that her mother was seeking to have under her, and said that, this was a child who, not a child, no longer a child, but a young adult who had the means to manage these financial aspects of her life without kind of the guardianship and that comes with some of this transition planning. So it's something to families should be thinking about and preparing for. I think it's becomes most urgent as the child is getting older, but for a number of things. For example, I had a client where the parents were suing kind of like a malpractice at the time of birth, that the child lost oxygen and ended up, I guess, being diagnosed with a particular disability. And I remember talking to this parent about, if she does, win in a settlement or in court, the money, that's, and she was like, she was going to put it in a special needs trust, and that was how she was going to, be able to protect her child, moving forward. And this was even a young, this was like a toddler. So she was already kind of, planning ahead, like, this money, wasn't going to be, for her and her husband to start spending or whatever they were going to do, but to kind of save, put it aside, and then it wouldn't impact him as he gets older and needs access to some of these, government assistance.
Yes. Thank you so much for that. I do want to make sure we get to Audrey's hand. Audrey, if you can unmute.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Perfect, perfect. So I know all of our children, we lost so much time because of the pandemic. Is there any possibility for DOE or the state, I don't know how it would work, to extend the age to maybe 22, opposed to trying to get back compensatory time and compensatory related services that were missed during the pandemic?
I know there was some advocacy around that. I remember seeing things maybe in definitely 2020 and also 2021 last year about extending a child's eligibility for special education services. So if they were in that category of turning 21 in that particular school year, but understanding that they missed out on a whole bunch of education, but it's compensatory education. It can allow a child to benefit or to receive special education services beyond the period of eligibility. And so that was always the case, even before COVID, was that, okay, just because you're 21, things are supposed to stop, right? At some point, education is done. But if there are still claims, if there were still claims within the past, the most recent 2 school years or calendar years, however you want to think about it, then parents were still allowed to bring a claim and say that. So in terms of a not necessarily a policy shift, but a statutory shift to extend that time, to say 22 years old instead of 21. I don't foresee that happening at this point. I think, to change the law just requires a lot of steps. And so I think even if it can happen, I don't think it's, definitely not for the kids that are, 21 or 20 years old right now. I don't see that being feasible, just knowing the state of, laws and Albany and things like that, the politics of it. But from just a pure special ed perspective, if a potential client came to me and said they felt like, over the past 2 school years, their child has, made either minimal progress, didn't get the services on the IEP, or the services on the IEP were inappropriate to begin with, there's still a viable claim for it. But it's going to look different. I mean, I don't know if they're going to have, a hearing officer will say this 22-year-old or 23-year-old should sit in the high school that they were attending before, but it may just be like a bank of hours that I see that, more commonly of, well, here's some private tutoring and this is going to help you move on to the next stage of what your post-secondary life, and then that is what would be ordered.
Thank you. Do we have any further questions for Ms. MP Reynolds? Thank you for your time in this presentation and just giving to the community. It is really something awesome. We're going to make sure that we have this online, but I do want to double check, does any other attendee have a question for Ms. MP Reynolds? No, well, we do have one final question for Ms. Wright, one of the panelists that we didn't get a chance to get to. Could you tell us about some of the signs that a parent might be looking for or need to be aware of when it comes to their child in ADHD or ASD, and what may be, if something doesn't seem typical for their age range, what are some of the things that they should be looking out for behavior-wise?
Sure. So that's for me, right? Not Ms. Wright.
That one actually is for Ms. Wright.
Oh, okay, because I could just speak from my client's perspective, but Miss Wright, I
Oh,
know.
if you can jump in on a little bit of that too, I would love.
All right, I can finally, can you guys hear me now? Because I was unmuted. All right, who would you like to say to answer?
What are the signs to be aware of when a child is having behaviors that would not seem typical for their age range?
Do you want Miss Reynolds to answer or me? I don't know.
You can lead it out, Rebecca.
Okay, I can lead it out. Well, I will say this, I always go towards the tantrums. A lot of people would say there are that tantruming and being cranky and wanting their way and being rigid could be normal to a certain extent. However, when we talk about the diagnosis, we're talking about longer periods of time. So you'll have children that have a diagnosis, they'll say, oh, that's typical, but then the children that have the diagnosis, it's beyond the normal time. So the tantrums are happening more frequently, longer in duration. It's a little bit more intense than a typical developing child. So I'll start with the tantrums. Also, you might have children that, they might be, well, they're shy. Well, they're shy, and then there is some signs where you notice that there's avoidance of eye contact or wanting to play alone or just really avoiding any type of social contact with any child. Or I've heard this, boys, it takes a little longer for the boys to start talking. I've heard pediatricians say that. And again, when I mentioned in my presentation, just, some healthcare providers are still learning a lot more about autism. And I did some research that a lot of them are not following the checklist. They're not following through with the screening that they should, but that's another topic. But to say that a child, oh, well, boys, or he's a little delayed, he'll come and he'll catch up later on. It's different when the developmental milestones are not being hit in the sense of communication and the communication piece. So these are things to look out for. Just know that it's a little bit more extreme, a little bit more longer and exaggerated in the behaviors and it's beyond the typical time.
Okay, thank you so much. Miss MP Reynolds, you wanted to touch on that or?
Yeah, just very quickly, because I know I had for another group, I had done a presentation about, the warning signs and why your child may actually need an IEP. So just really briefly, the standard is if there's an adverse impact on your child's educational performance. So a decline in grades, a change in their mood or mental health status, irritability, if they're having difficulty concentrating, school phobia, being fearful of getting out of the house when they know they have to go to school, very general, social and behavioral difficulties, difficulty keeping up with their classmates, of course, complaints from teachers, that's always a red flag. And then any, increase in disciplinary infractions. And then if supports that are already available, like AIS, academic intervention services, I know it's called something different now, if those things aren't working, these are all, I think, signs that perhaps getting an evaluation will help clarify what's happening.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Before we end our conference with our acknowledgements, I do want to let everyone know this information and these sessions will be on our website. Resources will be sent out to the people that attended. It will also be available on ccd75.org. Everything that you need. If you just want to go to the website, we should possibly have that up and working before Monday. That is the goal. I do want to say thank you to all of the presenters and for your time. And I do want to take the space to thank the people that helped pull this together. And with that being said, I want to toss it over for acknowledgements to Amy Ming Tsai, my co-chair for Outreach.
Thank you, Christy. And it was an honor to work with Christy as well in the planning stage and preparation, alongside our other council members, Christy Montalvan and Constance Isudu, who we all worked really diligently to make sure that this conference was well resourced and from the great presenters here who have great knowledge for their professional and personal experiences. And then also to our entire council for making sure that this conference will work and run efficiently today on a Saturday. So we just wanted to acknowledge our presenters who took the time to create their deck and also preparation for being here today and staying on. Ryan Grimes, who is a certified pediatric nurse practitioner who has expressed her experiences through students and families through their journey. And Rebecca Wright from Right Way Care, Lala Yusubuva, apologize again, who's the executive director of Spark Kids. Thank you for sharing your program and expressing the need for our community, and hopefully we'll get more services for this program. And from Wendy, who is, I apologize, Wendy, who's from Adapt Community Network, and Francis from Manhattan Transition and Access Center, and lastly, Orona from Legals. I apologize, I'm reading from a script. MSR Legal and Consulting Services. Appreciate all of you being here and staying on.
Don't forget the survey. Don't forget the survey.
Yes, I will. Thank you so much, Craig. So please complete the post conference survey. Give us a little bit of feedback as to what you like, what can be improved, what maybe next time we can add to our conferences, and really hope that we can continue. This is actually our first, and we see a wealth of knowledge that our families are getting. We hope that they really enjoyed and be empowered, that you're not alone in this journey with your child and your family, but there are support teams here. And there's lots of people here also can connect you to other organizations and agencies. So we will have our survey linked in the chat as well as on our website, ccd75.org. And please also follow us on our social media platforms on Facebook, Twitter, and if I'm missing one, Christy, please add. And we'll also share all the information. Great. And then we'll share all this information. And we know that, you know, families unfortunately today weren't able to participate here because there's so many things going on around the city. So you would have an opportunity to view the clips of every session on our website. Christy will get that out to you soon. And again, I know there was some technical things that happened earlier, but thank you for just following us through the end of this. And we will stay on. If anybody wanted just to leave their information in the chat box or questions or just need a little guidance, we're here, we're gonna stay on, but please take the beautiful day to enjoy with your families and stay hydrated with water and grab a snack. We know we've been here for a while and we will be back for another conference soon. So thank you so much and good afternoon now.
Yes, thank you. Have a great day, everyone. Mr. Spencer, did you have anything that you wanted to add or?
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, this coming Wednesday evening, our council will be leading, along with 3 other parent bodies, the superintendent candidate town hall, start at 7:15 to 9:15 p.m. Please email our council, d75council@schools.nyc.gov. If you didn't get the link, it's not through us, it's through the DOE, but we have 2 candidates. There's questions. There'll be questions from the chat that the candidates will have to stay to field. So please, and this is work that it took a lot of work. We need to get this to you to empower you. So please be on the lookout for that. Christy, I'll work with you offline to make sure that that connection is, because we don't have the connection. We don't own it. We didn't make it. Our next council meeting, a joint meeting, is June 15th. That's the last one of the year. There's several things will be going on. We'll hopefully, cross our fingers, have some information more on summer instruction. And we're trying to set up a meeting to get more information to give you. There'll be wrap-ups of this and other events. So yeah, the most important thing is Wednesday night, 7:15. superintendent candidate town hall. Get it. It's about 20, 25 minutes for you guys to ask questions in the chat. So please pass that around. We'll get that out as much as we can. Thank you so much.
Well, guess I need to unmute. With that being said, thank you again. Thank you very much, Amy Ming Tsai, my co-chair, for all of the council members that have supported today. I did see Patricia Hewitt, Celia, Joanne, Craig.
Aisha, she came in. Thank you.
Aisha, yes. Aisha is here as well. So thank you once again. Do expect to watch these online, and if you need anything else, please feel free to reach out to our council. The council email is d75council@schools.gov.
Schools.nyc.gov.
.nyc.gov. Thank you so much. All righty, everyone have a great day. And
Stay
thank you.
safe, everybody. God bless.
Afternoon.
We staying on. We're good. Oh,
Yeah,
I want to start the recording.
a brief second.